Hey, hello everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and today I'm going to take you into one of my cases. Every once in a while, I do a video with an analysis of a case that I actually worked, as opposed to the many cases that I do analyze that are on television or have had documentaries done about them. These are really personal to me because I actually worked them, and I have a lot of inside information on these cases, which is why it's fun to present them to you, because you will actually learn way more about how things work when I can tell you the inside story. So, welcome to this show today, and let me welcome everybody who is in the chat room. We have a bunch of people here from Australia, New Zealand, and they've told me they're like up at like 4 in the morning. So I don't know what's wrong with you guys, but I wouldn't get up for a live show at 4 in the morning. But I'm glad you're here. It's really awesome. Walter Matilda is here. Beverly is here. Allison is here. Lisa N is here. Alec is here. Michaela is here. Mary is here. Did I say Beverly? Brenda? T. Kuhn is here. Florence is here. Annie Haley is here. Let's see. Christine is here. Who else do we have? CJ is here. And let's see. Texas Redhead is here. And now I can't. Now I'm like, it is one of those hot days. It's really hot in Maryland, and my glasses are fogging up, and now I can't read. Oh my God! And a whole bunch more people are here. And if I didn't say your name, sorry about that. And if you'd like to be in the chat room, let me start my show by saying this because it's important, as this is an educational channel. And I like to encourage people to support my channel. Please do join Patreon. The link is below. $5 a month. You can come to all the live shows. The live shows are only for patrons of Patreon. And that way we have a great community. And after the show is over, the show does go public. So you don't have to join Patreon to see any of my shows. All of my shows are public. But it is great because you can come to all the lives and be in the chat room and be in our community. And also, if you don't want to pay that extra money that YouTube makes you pay, if you don't want to see the advertisements, join Patreon, because if you come to the live shows, or even if you miss a live show before the show goes public, you can still see it with the link, and you won't see any advertisements. That's a good deal. If you don't want to do all that, please do just subscribe to the channel. You can always buy books, hit little dollar signs, support this educational channel in one way or the other. Just being here is good for me. All right, so on to this case. All right, now, it's a toasty day in Maryland. At least it's not over 100 like some places, and we're not burning up like Maui. Prayers to Maui, because I'm a big lover of Hawaii, and it just really super sad what's happening in Maui right now. I can't even wrap my head around it, having spent time there. It just, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go depressed at the beginning of the show. So on that note, speaking of other weird things, so I'm coming back from the pool, and I pulled into the gas station, and I got to see a barbecue. And you say, what's a barbecue? This is a barbecue. Yeah, this car. The fire truck was there. The police were there, and apparently this entire car was like super fried. I mean, it was just burnt. The windows were blown out. The whole engine was gone. The one thing I can say is that the fellow who was driving it and his girlfriend were just saying, "Thank God we didn't go up with the car in flames." So that's a barbecue, in case you're wondering. I think that's a police word. It was like, whoa, that sucks. That really sucks. So, life is weird like that. 1 minute you're driving down the road, and the next minute your car's on fire. So not sure how that happened. Oh, welcome, Nikki. First live. Yay, that's awesome. You made it here. That's fantastic. All right. Now, can everybody hear and see me properly? Since last week I did something really stupid. Oh, look at this. Now I'm doing a lot of stupid things. Last week I left my microphone on the other side of the table, and people are like, "You were really echoey." I'm like, that's because my microphone wasn't anywhere near me. So can you hear me properly and see me properly before I go on to the case and screw this up? Okay. Lisa S says you can. All right. Everybody says they can see and hear me. Okay, cool. All right. Anyway, whew. All right. Gosh, this is like ungodly hot. Whew. Yeah, it'll be autumn soon, and I'll be all depressed because it'll be cold. But right now, it's swelteringly hot. All right, this case. All right, let me go to, you're not going to see too many photos with this case because there are none. All right. These photos you see here, I'm going to explain how I even got these photos. This is a photo of the outside of the home where 2 homicides occurred. And here we have, this is the kitchen where one of the victims was found on the floor back there. And I'm not going to get any closer because there's blood evidence and then YouTube will not be happy with me. So yeah, I'm not going to show you anything this is it. You're not going to see anything particularly unsettling. This is the hallway. And at the top of these stairs is where the other victim was found dead. So there were 2 victims, one here and one here inside this house. There's a reason I can't give you more photos or that I even got to see too many photos, but it's going to be a very interesting story about how I actually ended up with these photos. Let me read you just the most basic story about this case. I'm going to go into a bigger explanation. There's almost nothing on the internet, so don't waste your time trying to find a documentary or anything like that. You're not going to find it. The only site that even tells a little bit of the story is a site called murdervictims.com, and it's very short and somewhat not correct, but just a short little thing. But I'm going to read you this anyway because it's useful. The first thing they talk about is one of the victims. His name is Murray, and I got involved in this case because Murray's daughter contacted me. And the only picture, I don't have a picture of the other victim, Phyllis Mullett. I do not. And I don't have a picture of Murray either, but apparently this is a picture of Murray. That this person, I don't know, that must have been from a newspaper back in the day that they got a hold of. So this is the marshal, Murray Griffin. And it says here he was 64 years old. He was the police chief in the city of Bellefontaine, Ohio. Very, very small place. It says here about Murray. It's just nice to know. Murray seems like was a really great guy. Murray was in the police force for 25 years. He only took home just $25 each week for his position as the police chief. Murray kept the job because someone needed to do it, and Murray's house payment was only $90 a month, so in a way it paid for his home. However, Murray would plow snow, pick up trash, and patch up the residential streets as his main job. Just a really sweet guy in a very, very tiny town. All right. Now, the town, it says here, the general population of Bell Center during the time was a total of 900 people. And I raised my kids in a town of 1,000 people. And maybe mine was 1,000 homes. So maybe I had 2,000 people in my town. So we're really talking small, like maybe 400 or 500 houses at the most. Very, very small place. And actually, I wrote in my book, by the way, in the profiler book, this is the last case I had in this book. And this is what I wrote about arriving in that town of Bell Center. It says, I returned to things are flying. I returned to the Midwest. The town was so small that when I asked for a good place to eat, I was told to go back wherever I came from. Supposedly there's like a bar in town. And what did I say? It was a bar in town and maybe one store, but it was that small. The sheriff's office was in the nearest big town, and it wasn't very big. And that's the town. I think it's called Bellefontaine, although it reads Bellefontaine. And it's been so many years I don't actually remember the pronunciation. I looked at it as a French pronunciation, but I'm not sure that people said Bellefontaine. They might have said Bellefontaine. And if you lived in whatever it is, let me know what you actually say. So I arrived there in the next big town. The sheriff had the same look on his face as a detective in the Hoover murder. So this was one of the other cases I had worked, actually in Ohio. And I looked at this guy. I'm like, oh, am I going to get bad news again? I said, don't tell me. Problems with the case files? Because I had been okayed for coming out to work with the police department in both of these cases in Ohio. And, one of the things people don't understand is that most criminal profilers do not make their money from criminal profiling because police departments don't have extra money to hire in experts to come and spend a week with them. They don't. So they rely on either some other source that just will offer them help or somebody who volunteers their help. So if they get a profiler who's willing to come in for whatever reasons, because they're interested in the case, because they want to build their resume, because they want to help the family, because they want to help the police, whatever their reason is, but they're not going to get paid. And so at that time, as an independent profiler, they weren't going to give me any money either. So I paid for the plane flight out. I paid for the rental car. I paid for the hotel. I paid for everything. And my hope was that as my organization grew, that more people would donate to the organization to cover my expenses so that I could work on cases. Well, it didn't turn out to be so. It was amazing how few people donated anything. It's kind of a sad situation, but people that they didn't have to, they didn't. And so I would have made more money as a private investigator. I could have charged $50 to $100 an hour. And oddly, people pay for private investigators, but when it comes down to this situation, you should get paid. So I went there on my own steam, work this case, and I got there. I'm like, oh, this is something wrong here again, like the other case in Ohio. What was it? I said, problems with the case file. The sheriff was disgusted. The judge won't release them. What? Isn't this an open case? He said, I know. It's ridiculous, but he sealed them. So I had access to only a few police reports and interviews and one autopsy out of 2, but no photos, no evidence reports, no forensic reports. At least I had a nice sheriff and a fascinating case. But if you ask why this would happen, it's called politics. Politics rules a lot of cases when it comes down to certain issues and problems. There's a lot of infighting that goes on. There's sometimes fightings between the prosecution and then the actual police department, the sheriff's department, sometimes the defense attorney, the judges. All kinds of weird things happen. But this one was sealed. Could not access anything, even though it was an open case. Even the sheriff couldn't access the information for his own case. Crazy stuff. Absolutely crazy stuff. So that's me arriving in town. All right. Yes, Ohio, Annie. Ohio. I had a tremendous amount of cases in Ohio. It was really weird. People would call me up and they go, can you come and work on this case? And I go, where do you live? And I'm like, don't say Ohio. Not that I don't love Ohio, but I was tired of going to Ohio. There was when I was in my early days of profiling, I don't know why so many cases were Ohio. Like, can't we have Hawaii? Can't we have San Francisco? Can't we have, some places I want to visit? Sorry, Ohio. I do love you. I've been there, but I didn't keep wanting to go back over and over again. So anyway, somebody said, Pat, get a ceiling fan. They're wonderful. Yeah, and you can't do them during a show. That's the problem. Any kind of fan, it's very hard to get them to be that silent and not. It gets difficult when you're doing an actual YouTube show. So you actually have to have total silence in the room and nothing moving and so on and so forth. But a few more days of sweltering, it'll be over. All right, so let's see what happened in this case. Okay, so around 11:20 one evening, Murray, and his name is Murray Griffin. Murray Griffin is the name of the police chief, also known as a marshal. It was Murray Griffin. I want to point out, again, 64 years old. It was kind of a slight fella, not a big guy. Weighed about 130 pounds. So he wasn't a big, tough guy. And that does play into some of the issues in this case. So his name was Murray Griffin. The woman's house, her name was Phyllis Mullett. As somebody just said, that's a dreadful name. And poor Phyllis, yeah, it wasn't the best name in the world. Not a beautiful name. And I have no idea what she even looked like, okay, because I don't have a picture of her. I never saw that. Well, interesting what Matilda says here. I thought court documents were sealed because something horrendous had happened, something the public couldn't take. Didn't know it was due to in-house fighting. Oh, yeah. Oh, they don't really give a crap about the public. The issue is it's either a media issue or there's some kind of infighting going on that they want to keep things sealed. Sometimes it can be things weren't handled properly and they want that sealed. It can be they don't want certain people to know the information, which could be protecting the case. There's a bunch of reasons, but in this case, there was no good reason. There really wasn't. All right, so about 11:20, Murray's phone, that's the police chief. It rang, and there was a man on the other end of the phone who said he was also on the phone with Phyllis Mullett. And when he was on the phone with her, and what had happened was, okay, Phyllis had gone to see this boyfriend. Okay, it was also her boss. Anyway, so she had driven like an hour away to see him and have a little time with him. And as she came back home, when she arrived home, she had had some concerns recently about her ex-husband, Richard, Dick Mullett, because he had a key to the house, and they were having some issues, battle over the divorce and money issues and that kind of stuff. And he would come. It was still his house too. You know what I mean? She lived there. He lived someplace else he had the two kids at his place at that point in time. They were sharing custody, but she is like, sometimes he comes into the house and he creeps me out because he's like around the house doing stuff, and I don't even know if he's here or not. So it creeps her out. So when she got home, he called her and she said, "Did you get home safely?" She said, "Yeah, I'm here. Everything's good." She had just taken a shower, and she had thrown like a sweater over, and I believe her shower was downstairs. And he said, "Well, check to make sure everything's okay in the house, right? And, everything's locked up and all that." So she was doing that, and she went up the stairs, I believe. And, so I take that back. I believe she was already upstairs. So I believe she took the shower, went upstairs, and answered the phone in the bedroom. Okay, let me show you I can show you the picture of the bedroom because that's okay. So anyway, here in the bedroom, there was a phone in the bedroom. I believe she was on the phone in the bedroom. And he said, "Go check things out." She laid the phone down. All right. This is not my analysis. This is just what happened. She laid the phone down to go check, to make sure, go check the things are locked up and all that. She didn't get far when he heard her scream. And at the point that she screamed, he realized something was wrong, and he called the police chief, Murray. Told Murray something's going on at the Mullett house. Please hurry there. Now, this is a teeny weeny little town, mind you. He's like down the street. Now, he immediately put on his clothes, put on his gun belt, and he hopped in his car and went down the street. Meanwhile, the boyfriend then called the other police people. He called, I think, the sheriff's department at that point. And so Murray was on his way there, and then the others were going to come. Now, they told him, "Well, tell Murray we'll wait and we'll back him up. Don't go in until you have backup." But unfortunately, Murray had already gone there. And the sheriff's department was going to arrive just a very short time after that. So everything happened really quickly here. So Murray goes there. His car was found outside with a door open. And he went around, supposedly went around back and shouted for her. And then he came around front. Somebody let him into the house. Okay. By the time the sheriff's department got there, so let's see. The sheriff's department arrived. Let me see if I want to read this from my book as opposed to from this website, so you can see what happened when they got there. Oops. All right. Let's see. Okay, everything's falling out of my book. Okay, hold on a second. These are my little bookmarks. Okay. That's not what I wanted. I wanted the arrival. Okay. Okay, here we go. So essentially, okay, 10 minutes later, so he gets there, and they had said, tell Bob we're on, well, it's not Bob because that was the pseudonym I used. Tell Murray we're on our way. But it's too late. Murray was already there. 10 minutes later, so it's for a short period of time. 10 minutes later, patrol cars screamed into the 8-block town. It's a small town. To the front of the Mullett residence. The house was dark. Murray's car was parked haphazardly at the curb, the driver's door hanging open. No one answered the door. Around back, the police officers discovered the sliding door was open. Entering the house, they saw Phyllis Mullett right there on the kitchen floor, half naked, tied hand and foot, and a dozen stab wounds to the chest and her throat slashed. They called out for Murray, and they didn't get an answer. The house was eerily quiet. Moving up the stairs to the second floor, they found the marshal, or the police chief, at the top of the stairs, folded over. He was on his knees and just folded over, shot to death with his own gun. All right, that's what they found. Okay, so now, what happened? What happened in this house? And there ended up being, shall we say, two suspects, okay? Let me check on your comments before I go on to the two suspects. All right, Brenda says, he had to know who it was or he wouldn't have gone in. Yes, all right. So one of the things you'll find in crimes when you're analyzing a crime are there are certain things which to me stand out above all the other evidence that point to something very, very important. And you just pointed one of them out. Murray goes there. Now, it's a small town. And he knocks on this door. Something horrible is happening. Phyllis is screaming in that house. Bad things are happening there. Like a scream was heard. Something happened behind that door. He knocks. Somebody lets him in. Now, what other interesting thing? He's found at the top of the stairs, shot with his own gun. Gun is missing, but he was shot with his own gun. 5 shots from the gun. Interestingly enough, he had a revolver, and it was a 6 places to put your little bullets. He only used 5. The first one was not there. It was nothing there. His idea was if anybody ever got hold of his gun and pulled the trigger, the first one wouldn't go off. Apparently, that didn't work out well for him here. But the other 5 were shot. The first shot was somebody who was trying to pull the gun out of his holster and shot him in the leg through the holster, and then got hold of the gun and shot him the rest of the times. And that's what killed him. So here we'll have our profiling class right here. Somebody let him in. He walked in. The next thing he does is he goes up the stairs with his gun in his holster. He gets attacked at the top of the stairs. What does that tell you about the person that let him in? And you say that, hold on a second. Let's see. So let me go back here a second. That it had to be somebody he knew. Okay. And Brenda says he had to know who it was. He wouldn't have gone in. That is correct. He waited a long time to call if they did all that to her. Oh, no. He called quite quickly. He did, because she screamed. Now, unless he was in on it, he didn't wait a long time. He was still on the phone with her when he called over to the police chief, to Murray. And Murray had to get ready to get over there. He was hanging around the house. He had to get dressed. It was 11 o'clock at night. So he had to take 5 minutes to get dressed, and he had to get in his car, and he had to drive over there. So he was there first, and then the other ones came in 10 minutes later. So there was at least a period of 5 or 10 minutes for something to be happening, okay, at some point. And I'm going to explain how that time frame would all work out. But you're correct. He didn't wait a long time. Everything just happened like boom, 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 boom. And there's a reason for this. And I'll tell you what. Okay. Michaela says sexual homicide. Okay, Michaela, why do you say that? What evidence do you have at this point that this is a sexual homicide? And I'm curious to get your answer on that, because this is where, when we're analyzing something, we can come up with different possibilities, but I'm curious why you say sexual homicide. Somebody did let him in, yes, and he had to have known him. This is absolutely true. First of all, it's 11 o'clock at night, it's a small town, and somebody did let him in, and obviously it wasn't some creepy stranger, or he would have been kind of concerned about this guy. So he had to have familiarity with the guy. All right. And he was willing to what? Go up the stairs with the guy. And one of the questions will be, why is he going up the stairs? Why are they going up to the bedroom? What's the purpose of this? And why then was he shot on the top of the stairs? Let's see. Michaela says yes. Oh, only 5 in a 6-round chamber. Good for you. As somebody that made sense to be in the house. Okay, Leslie, she lived alone at that point in time. But there were 2 people that had keys to the house. One was her ex, which was Richard Mullett, or her estranged husband. And the other one was a guy named Terry Lowe. Terry Lowe babysat her kids. He also had a key to that house. All right, so those are the 2 that had access to her home. Let's see. Good point. Stabbing someone can take seconds. Yes, I talk about this a lot. In one of my cases, I'm trying to remember which one it was now. I actually did a demonstration because somebody said, I don't know how within a minute somebody could have been stabbed 40, 50 times. And I actually timed it in the video. I was stabbing myself with a little knife. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And boy, yeah, within a minute, lots of stabs. This is a good question. Good question, Lisa. Boyfriend called from his home, which was an hour away. In, I believe it was Lima, Ohio, or Lima, Ohio. I don't know how to pronounce that one either. Lima or Lima. I think it's Lima, Ohio. He lived quite a distance. They had been together that evening. She had driven all the way that far home. And that's what he called her to see if she had gotten home. And yes, he was at a distance. He definitely, the boyfriend was, or whoever she was hanging with, that was her boss, definitely was not the guy who did it. So, okay, Michaela. Thank you for answering. She was half naked. Okay, why does half naked make it a sexual homicide? And this was a problem with profiling that was done on this case. It was assumed to be a sexual homicide. I'm going to get into why it was even more likely theorized by a certain person, John Douglas, as to why it was a sexual homicide. One was that she was half naked. The other was that she was bound. Her hands were bound and her feet were bound. All right. But remember this about the case. She had just come out of the shower. She threw something over herself and she was downstairs, went upstairs to answer the phone in the bedroom, probably because she was going to go to bed. That's why she went upstairs to answer the phone. She was going to get dressed for bed. She was half naked anyway. So this is important to understand, that just because somebody's found naked doesn't mean that there was a sexual component. A lot of people sleep entirely naked. That's the way they like to sleep. So it doesn't mean anything. Some people just sleep in a t-shirt. Again, you could find them with their t-shirt pulled up and nothing underneath. And people go, sexual homicide. No, maybe they just fell that direction. The shirt flew up and it's just what they were wearing in bed. Some people wear that in the middle of the day. So you find a woman in a t-shirt, no underwear at 1 PM and you say, oh my God, it's sexual homicide. Not necessarily. And I'm going to get to the rope issues in a minute. That's why she was tied up. Okay, stabbing and hogtied too. Again, could it be a sexual homicide? Yes. Is that proof of a sexual homicide? No. By the way, there was also semen. Does that prove a sexual homicide? How many of you think that the semen proves a sexual homicide? Okay, I'm curious. How many of you think that the semen that they found in her and on her or whatever was proof of a sexual homicide? He wasn't home. I think he was calling off of a landline. This was. Oh, did I tell you when this was? How long ago? It was a landline. He was definitely not there. Just to let you know. The person who opened the door can't have been bloody, or a struggle would have taken place on the threshold. Yes and no. And this here, he was led upstairs. I believe that's accurate. There's no reason for the sheriff to choose to go upstairs. I'm sorry, the police chief to choose to go upstairs, unless he was led upstairs. And I would assume he would be led upstairs with some kind of excuse, because remember, she had been heard. There was a scream heard. He would have to say something to the effect of, "Oh, she's fallen. She screamed because she fell and her leg was she's twisted or she's broken her ankle or something, and I was about to call for help, but you're here. Come up. She's in the bedroom." Something like that. And the police chief goes up to find out what injury she has. That is most likely what happened. Did the husband hire a hitman? Well, that was a consideration, except for the fact that the likelihood of the police chief being comfortable with some guy opening the door who was a hitman is unlikely. Did the dude live next door? No, he didn't live next door. He could have spied on her, and it's very possible whoever did this was actually outside the home at the time that she came out of the shower. Was not actually in the home. Why do I say this? Because if the person, there's two people with keys, the babysitter and the ex. If they were in the home, they'd be hiding, but the likelihood of them hiding in the home and then they allow her to go ahead and have a shower and answer a phone. And the person apparently did not know that she was on the phone when she screamed. Or remember, there's time from the time she screamed, from the time from when the police chief came and then the sheriff's department. You would think if he saw a phone in her hand and knew she was on the phone when she screamed, he'd just get the hell out of there. But he was still there. So probably he did not realize she was even on the phone. She probably left the phone on the bed, entered the hallway, and either got attacked in the hallway or wherever, and did not realize she was on the phone. That's why he continued, because remember, she wasn't tied up and stabbed till after the scream. So that person had to be unaware that the police were coming until somebody showed up. So he went on and did what he was going to do. So the chance while she takes a shower, goes and answers the phone is unlikely, because he'd just go ahead and do what he's going to do. Why wait? She's home alone. She arrived home alone, which you want to make sure she didn't bring some dude with her, right? Then you have a problem. If you want to catch her alone, you either have to be in the house, making sure nobody's arrived with her, or be right outside the house to make sure nobody arrived with her. So the question is, where was this person at the time? So let's see what Marianne has to say. If she put the phone down, not back on the hook, how was the boyfriend able to make a call to the police? I can't remember the situation on that. I'm glad you asked that, but I can't remember. Supposedly he was on the phone. That's what I have in my notes. He was on the phone with her, and he called the police. I don't know. I don't know if I'd have to look that up. I'm actually confused about that myself. And it may be that he hung up and called the police. But something was wrong in the paperwork, that little I saw, what somebody told me. Let me look here a second and see if I see it in my own book. It was someplace. It was something weird, and I'm not sure why that was true. It may be inaccurate. Okay, let's just go with that. At the moment, I can't determine that. I don't know whether it was in some other records I have, or I'm not sure about that. I honestly can't answer it. All I can say is this: she screamed. He was on the phone with her. She screamed. He called, and he was not in town. He was an hour away. That is proven, and nobody's ever questioned that. So let's see. Oh, you don't just let anyone in if you're partly dressed. No, I don't believe she let anyone in. I believe they let themselves in. I don't think she ever let anybody in that house. She was talking to her boyfriend when he said, check the house. And while she was checking the house, he heard the scream. So somebody was already in the house. She didn't let them in. Yes, and this is going to be an interesting twist in this whole thing. Okay. Yes, there was DNA, semen DNA. There absolutely was. And then there was some other DNA, and I'm going to get to that later. Well, proves it's not a woman, not necessarily. There you go, Allison. Yes, she had visited her boyfriend. The semen was from her boyfriend. not from this crime. And that's important because originally, if you see the semen's in the crime, oh, look, it's a sexual homicide. This semen came elsewhere before the homicide. And this can be true in quite a few cases where a semen is found. It doesn't mean the semen that's found is the guy that killed her either. And people have been in real trouble for that. And they're like, well, yeah, I had sex with her, but I didn't kill her, type of thing. In other words, I did that, and then I left, and then somebody else came in. And sometimes it's just a lie, but sometimes it's the truth. And sometimes they'll find, for example, a woman who's been killed, and they don't really have proof of rape, but they have semen. And they say, aha, this is sexual homicide. They look for the guy whose semen was left, and they're like, well, we haven't had anybody come forward who said he was with her that evening. And I'm like, if I were that guy and you're thinking I killed her, I'm not letting you know I slept with her. I'm going to hide as long as I can hide. If I'm not in the CODIS bank, my DNA is not someplace, I'm shutting up. I'm not going to say, oh yeah, I was there. Oh yeah, I'm not an idiot. So sometimes it's just, you're not going to find out who had sex with her because they're scared. And it may not be the killer. So yes, the semen was his. Depends where the semen is. Okay. If semen is far enough inside, it's not being washed away. Okay. Unless she's doing a douche thing, which she was just, not necessarily doing. Well, first of all, you're talking about how quickly anything was done and how well it was done. Now, here we go. Here's the problem. I don't know how well it was done. I don't think it was necessarily done that well because we don't have the photos to see whether it was an intricate anything. All we know is her feet were tied and her hands were tied. That's it. That's all we know. Okay, so we don't want to just jump to the conclusion, and so there becomes the problem. All right, so now what happened at this point? So I'll have to go back to my book because the rest of this is nonsense. All right, so okay, wait a minute. I've lost my thing slid out. No, don't do that. Hold on a second. All right. So here is where we have what happened next. All right. So they were horrified. The police officer were horrified. So what they had here was the police chief found dead at the top of the stairs, shot to death with his own gun. Woman's dead in the kitchen, stabbed to death, throat cut. All right. So they started out doing a real working very hard at it. Then they were trying to figure out who did it. What went wrong here? All right. Hold on a second. I want to see if I don't have that part here. When first person they did suspect was the ex-husband, because that's usually who did it, right? Who's involved in something like this. And he's one of those that had the keys. They went to his home, which was about 15 miles away. He had an alibi. He was there. And he had an alibi. What was the alibi? That his two children were sleeping in the next room. And if you watch one of my recent videos, I talked about the no alibi. That's a no alibi. His kids were asleep. That didn't mean he couldn't commit the crime. He could just leave them there asleep and walk out of the house, do whatever he did, and come back. Maybe that's the whole great thing about it. His kids sleep well, and therefore they're going to say, "Yeah, Dad was here. We went to bed. Dad was here." When they got to the ex's house, they found that his engine of the vehicle was still warm, was hot. At least, okay, now this is going from information from inside. I got this information from, I believe that information came from Murray's daughter. So they came there and the hood of the vehicle was hot. Why would it be hot if he's just inside the house with the kids? They did GSR on him testing, and they came up with residue on his hand, GSR residue. He claimed he was shooting fireworks off of the children. Okay, so that was one person. However, they never searched his home. He never was polygraphed. None of this, nothing more happened at that point with that guy. Now, a little while later, another thing happened. All right. So it was about the babysitter, Terry Lowe. All right. So the babysitter, Terry Lowe, had gone missing. And I'm a little confused on how much after the crime this was. The father called and said he had, let me see if I can find it here. Hold on. Well, okay, so what had happened was, hold on a minute. There's a lot of information here. He had, let me find it. The father of the babysitter, Terry Lowe, he used to go over and babysit the kids on occasion. And he said something had happened with Terry. They left a suicide note and then disappeared. And he disappeared and he faked a suicide, saying, I can't take it anymore. Apparently, this is what supposedly happened. The woman he was babysitting was murdered. The police were hounding him and insinuating he had something to do with it. He was growing tired of caring for his sick father. One day, he drove his car to a lake and left a suicide note saying he couldn't deal with anything anymore. However, they found him in a cheap hotel down the way. Okay. This became their main suspect. All right. Because she was kind of creepy. All right. And he did have access to the house. Now, this is where they came up with, okay, so and we know that's John Douglas. All right. The FBI profiler claimed the stab wounds to Christine's breast area were sexual in nature. Right there, I'm having problems. Just because somebody stabs a woman in the breast doesn't mean it's sexual. It means he's trying to stab her in the heart, and the breasts are just in the way of the heart, And you're in a rush, you're just stabbing away, trying to hit something to kill the person. So that's not a sexual, absolutely not necessarily a sexual thing. Now, if you find something like this, if you find, like, for example, a killer does something like 10 stab wounds in a circle around the nipple, I'm going to say that's sexual in nature. But just stab wounds to the chest with a breast scar is not sexual in nature necessarily. All right. So the semen didn't belong to the killer. The stab wounds do not mean a sexual homicide. So now we're down to the ropes being tied. All right. Could be a sign of bondage, correct? However, again, is this true? Is that what had happened? Is this guy tying her up for the purposes of bondage? Here's a problem I have with that. She wasn't found in the bedroom. He's tying her up. She's down in the kitchen on the hard floor. With her I think the hands were tied behind the back, as far as I know. But that's, again, that was the word I got. And her feet were tied, but not tied extremely well. They were hobbled. And it just seems like kind of an odd place to decide to do your bondage thing when you've got a nice bedroom upstairs. Why the hard kitchen floor? I mean, doesn't really work for me. And so the question is, would there be another reason for her to be tied? Okay. And we have to, no, there were none of those. Yeah, GSR could be totally innocent. But the problem is they did GSR testing on him. Now, they didn't do GSR testing on the babysitter. They didn't get around to him for a while. So that gets all very, very confusing. Control. Oh, sorry, it's control. Yes, they would control her and also to subdue her. Okay, yes. All right. So now here's one of the things one has to be careful of. You can't go with one thing. You always have to look at all the different issues. Now, they decided it was Terry Lowe because he acted weird. But the real reason they decided it was Terry Lowe was because of a thing called the power list. And this was from John Douglas. All right. So, and also, by the way, let me tell you a little bit about Terry Lowe. So, Terry Lowe had an alleged history of sexual deviancy, although I did not find any evidence of this. All right. Where did that information come from? It came from her estranged husband, Dick Mullett. All right. Right after the crime, he was brought in for questioning. And during the interview, he and his children told the police of disturbing behavior by Terry Lowe when he was around children. Okay. Now, these are his kids, and Dad has had access to the kids, so he can always encourage the kids what to say. Or they may be telling the truth. Don't know which way it goes. But the information about Terry Lowe and his behavior came from Dick Mullett. He said that Dick Mullett liked to, where's the stuff about him playing with the kitties? Hold on a second. So much information on this case, it gets a little crazy. Where's my stuff on that? He apparently, the claim is, I have to find the thing that he claimed. No, I'm blanking here. Hold on a second. Must be in my other report. Let me see if I can find it. The claim was that he did a lot of creepy things with kids, like showing them some pornography. And the claim was he sometimes tied them up and dragged them around the house, which that is like really concerning, right? I mean, you look at that and you go, wait a minute here. That would make me want to look at this dude, right? But let me see if I can read from my. Hold on a second. I'm looking for my profile on the case. All right, let me see what it actually said. There was this guy, Terry Lowe. Apparently, what he did, he was a very effeminate guy, very kind of fragile looking, very effeminate, and he liked children, and he liked mucking around with children, and he liked hooking up with women that had children. He would like hook up with a macrame group or a knitting group, some group where women brought their children, and then he would ingratiate themselves with these women and their children. All right. He had a list he had written of the women's names and their children's names. And this list became known as the power list. This was according to John Douglas. All right. And what he decided was that this power list was a piece of paper found in Lowe's trash that had the names of some women in town, their husbands, and their children. And Phyllis Mullett's name was on this list. One of the women's names had a sexual comment next to it, but what that comment was or meant, I don't know. No words were written next to Phyllis's name. So there was no way to say that Terry Lowe was targeting her particularly. The FBI profiler, which was John Douglas, said that the paper might mean that it was a list of women he would like to have power over. This is an indication of Terry Lowe's ideation and plan for the sexual assault of Phyllis Mullett. Here's one of these problems. He has a power list. It says power on it for some reason. Got a list of women and their children. And how is this necessarily meaning that he wants to sexually assault the women? Okay, first of all, he likes the children. In my opinion, he exhibits behaviors of a pedophile. And the last thing you want to do is kill the mother of the pedophile. kill the mother of the children, because then you have no access to the children. See, this doesn't really Makes sense to me. Now, what happened was they arrested Terry Lowe. At that point, no evidence, okay? We went to court, and John Douglas was to testify in court, all right? And it didn't go well. John Douglas was really pissed off because what happened in that courtroom was that John Douglas, they wouldn't let him testify. What they said was this: in the case before us, the trial court has suppressed the testimony of Douglas upon finding out that Mr. Douglas's opinion is an investigative tool like a polygraph. It might be used to investigate, but it does not have the reliability to be evidence. Absolutely. So this is what profiling is. Profiling is also not proof of anything. Profiling is an investigative tool. So that he thought this power list could mean that maybe this guy had his eye on sexually assaulting Phyllis, maybe, but it's all in his own mind. He's deciding that. There's no proof that this is true. And it goes on. Having given careful consideration to the testimony elicited in this matter, we conclude that there is evidence in the record to support the trial court's finding that the opinion testimony of Douglas is not reliable evidence. As a whole, the record reflects that Douglas's opinion, for the most part, is based on the behavioral science of clinical psychology, an area in which he has no formal education, training, or license. Now, I have to laugh at this because I'm accused oftentimes of not having formal training in profiling. And they're accurate about that because there were no profiling courses in the United States. Now, the FBI has its own profiling unit, and there you can get what you consider behavioral profiling. Outside of that, you couldn't. Well, they were there, but the FBI doesn't provide psychological training. And so he had never had training in psychology. And so this was truly his opinion. Now, I'm not saying his opinion is necessarily wrong, but it is not evidence of something. And he doesn't have training in that. He's not a doctor of forensic psychology, even say that. Although some of them are quite fantastical themselves when they make up stuff about clients. And I'm like, how are you coming up with these concepts? You're just making this stuff up. Oh, this is what this person was thinking. You don't know. Most of the time, motive and all this stuff is more in the heads of the people claiming it than the actual person who committed the crime. So anyway, he had no formal education or training or license in that. In short, the purported scientific and analytical processes to which Douglas testified are based on intuitiveness honed by his considerable experience in the field of homicide investigation. While we in no way trivialize the importance of Douglas's work in the field of crime detection and criminal apprehension, we do not find that there is sufficient evidence of reliability adduced to demonstrate the relevancy of the testimony or to qualify Douglas as an expert witness. Accordingly, the errors assigned by the state is overruled. So he was not allowed to testify, and he was really upset about that because he believed Terry Lowe killed her because entirely because of the power list. And that is not evidence. It's an investigative tool. I'm not saying don't look at Terry Lowe. He's a kind of creepy dude. He had access to the house. You can look at him and not a problem. Douglas should have said that. He shouldn't have said he did it, but he can take a look at it. But to try to convict this guy in court, when they did at that point in time, now there's going to be a little twist in this case. That point in time, they did not have one shred of physical evidence that Terry Lowe was in the house, had committed the crime. Nothing. Just later on, he had this mental breakdown and had a power list. That was it? That you're going to convict a guy on that? So they threw it out. Terry Lowe was not convicted. Okay? So now, I think there was the word, it's so much information in this case, I can't remember all of it. I thought there was a word power up there. So I don't know that he made that one up. Okay. Harper, hi. Personality doesn't sound like the type to commit a violent murder, more like the poisoning or suffocating type rather than stabbing. Well, this is what's interesting. He was everybody around him. There was no violent history. He was very effeminate and more like played with the kiddies. I say he had kind of a, questionable thing about children. If he had raped one of the kids, that was more believable. But that this wimpy guy was wimpy guy suddenly decided to sexually assault and stab to death Phyllis Mullett and then kill the police chief seemed a bit unlikely for the character that he was supposed to be like. Now, not saying he couldn't have done it, but here, let's get back to the case. And when I came in and I said, what did he do? Now, I want to show you a part of my profile here. I'm going to go through why I came up with what I came up with. Here's the beginning of my profile. Sometimes people always say, I've never get to see one of your profiles. Do profiles ever go out to the public? Almost never. FBI profiles are almost never made public. But generally speaking, they're supposed to be an investigative tool. And also, once it's an investigative tool, it stays with the department. Other than that, people don't want you to find out that they were wrong. But anyway, I said this. This was the preliminary profile of the July 5th, 1986 double homicide of Phyllis Mullett and Murray Griffin. Now, note what I say. The preliminary profile is offered for the purposes of moving this cold case investigation forward. It is not intended to unequivocally identify the killer of Mullett and Griffin, as this profile has had only limited information available due to the judge's sealing of the case files. If and when those files become available, the added information may assist in further narrowing the suspect list and providing more valuable investigative avenues. All right, that's so right up front, I'm saying this is what I'm doing, okay? I also want to say, let me see if I have it at the bottom of this thing too. Okay, sorry, that's not it. Here. Again, this is a preliminary, see the note, this is a preliminary profile only. Let me see, I want to read this by my camera's in the way. Hold on, let me find the remainder of this that I want to read to you. Okay, here it is. Profiling theories are useful tools in determining avenues of investigation. Oh, great. Now sorry, I'm having a problem with stop doing that. Well, that's interesting. Well, hold on a second. All right. I have to move my camera. The preliminary investigation profile is only a theory based on available information. Profiling theories are useful tools in determining avenues of investigation. As new information becomes available, theories may change, and so will the best avenues of investigation. Profiling should never be misinterpreted as evidence. Profiling theory should not replace evidence in determining guilt in a court of law. All right? So as you see, I'm making very clear that this does not belong in court of law, and I'm not saying anybody's guilty. This is a theory to help increase investigative avenues. Now, okay, let me see what I said here. There are three possible suspects one can theorize responsible for the deaths of Mullett and Griffin. I will examine each without benefit of access to proper crime scene information. Terry Lowe, Dick Mullett, or an unknown suspect. All right, so the unknown suspect is extremely unlikely. Now, I'm going to do the next thing that, to me, was one of the keys in this entire case. And that is her scream. Now, the guy brought his own, as far as I know, and again, if I'm wrong, it's because the information I was given by people who were close to the case were not accurate, because I had no way to see the actual police reports. Okay. Now, Phyllis Mullett was on the phone. My belief is she put the phone down on the bed. She walked out to go check the house, and she screamed. I don't know exactly where she screamed, but wherever she screamed, she ran into a guy who had rope and a knife. Now, I'm going to pull this out here right now, and I want you to tell me. Okay, I didn't have a rope, so I'm using cables. Okay. All right. You come around the corner in your house, and you see somebody standing there like this. Here's my knife. Now, I want you to ask yourself this question. She screams. Ah! She is terrified. She sees a guy with a knife and a rope. Dick Mullett, Terry Lowe. Tell me what you think. No, the ex-husband had nothing to do with the scream. That was the boyfriend. The boyfriend heard her scream. The answer to that is she might have screamed a name, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, but we'll skip that for now. Why do you say ex-husband Nikki? I'm curious. What is your reasoning for why you say ex-husband as opposed to Terry Lowe? I'm waiting. Or does somebody? Would you have screamed if she saw her husband with a knife? This is her ex-husband. She's in a custody battle. They've been fighting. He said she's gonna rake him over the coals if they get divorced. She was creeped out by him being in the house. What do you want? Lisa, did you read my book? No. You say Dick Mullett because she was already afraid of him. Terry doesn't seem to be the violent type, and her ex has something to gain. All right. I would scream if I saw my ex with a knife or no knife. All right, good. All right. I'm imagining this in my head. I'm having custody issues with my husband, my ex. We're estranged. It's going to be a divorce situation. Okay. It's not going to be good. And the other guy is a guy who always comes over to babysit my kids. He's an effeminate little guy. Dick Mullett is not small. He's a big dude. Now, I want to ask you, if you saw Terry Mullett standing in your house with a knife and this rope, what would be the words out of your mouth? Would you scream or would you say something? Here's your babysitter, your little wimpy babysitter, standing there with some rope, and you go, what would you do? Would you go, ah, or would you say something? Because I would say something. Does anybody else think what they would say? You would laugh. I would think a little confusion might be concern. Don't do this. Don't do what? Why would you think that person is going to do anything to you? That is my answer. What the? I'd be going, yeah, what? Exactly. Yes, I think she didn't have any issues with the babysitter. He's this little thin guy, who plays with her kitties and takes care of her children. She trusted him enough to do that. And he's in her house. He comes in her house. Sometimes he's allowed in her house. He's got the key. She trusts him well enough for that. The ex she's estranged from, but it's still his house. So that's why he has the key. If she saw him, I mean, I've rented for people in my house before. I've had some characters. If I saw that character stand there with some rope and a knife, I would just go, what are you doing? What the? I would be confused. I wouldn't automatically think he's coming to kill me. I would be confused. So what? Now, later on, I might realize that he's up to no good. I might think that he's going to, I don't know, cut the rope in pieces and do something with it. Or I would just be, my initial response would be to be confused. Now, mind you, that is an opinion. And maybe she had a different response. But if you had to choose between Richard Mullett, if you see your ex-husband who you're having issues with standing in your house with a knife or a rope in the middle of the night, I'm going to think, oh my God, he's come here to kill me. That would be my first thought. I wouldn't think he's coming to do house repairs. But with my wimpy babysitter, I just don't know that my response would be immediately screaming like, oh my God, I'm dead. So that to me was interesting. And I had some issues with that. Now, the next thing, her hands were tied. Her feet were tied. She wasn't in the bedroom. She's downstairs. Now, apparently she was more like hobbled than tied up. And there's a big difference between the two of them. If she were laying on the bed, hogtied, I'd say you got a sexual crime going on. And she's tied to the, arms are tied to to some posts. I'd say you have a sexual homicide going on. But what would be the real point of tying her up at that moment? And she's downstairs. Now, mind you, this happens before Murray comes, because, it couldn't happen after Murray came. All right. There'll be no, once the police chief is shot, the guy's going to leave. Okay. He's not going to hang around. He's not going to tie her up at that point, tie her up and then stab her. He could have had her tied up. And then after the police chief was shot, he went down to stab her, but she wasn't gagged. So she would scream. She would be screaming a lot. So it makes a whole lot more sense that the reason she was stabbed at that point in time was because Murray was knocking on the door and he had to shut her up, because otherwise she's screaming. So she's already tied up and she's already in the kitchen. All right. So the question is, why is she tied up in the kitchen? And then she's stabbed as Murray arrives. Okay. So then there's no blood upstairs to speak of. And none of Murray's blood is downstairs and none of her blood is upstairs, except for a tiny, tiny drop of her blood in the bedroom where somebody appeared to have looked out a window. And I think that's when the sheriff's department was arriving. The person looked out to see, when he started hearing sirens. Oh my God, somebody else is coming. That's probably when that happened. And then they fled the house. So the question would be, why was she tied up? Nikki says, I think he planned on removing her from the house. That is what I believe. Now, if it was the little babysitter dude and he was just there for a sexual homicide, I don't know why he'd waste his time trying to get her out of the house. And that makes very little sense. So let's see. Lisa says, hobble tie or strap tie, prevent from straying. Yes. Hobbling basically is that you want the person to still be able to walk, but you don't want them to get away. So you tie them just enough. Well, she had to be eliminated because she could identify him 100%. So again, we don't have a stranger here. There's no question that this is one of the two of them, shall we say. One of the two of them. Okay, so now I want to go to, if I can get it back. What the heck I'm having trouble with my some reason I want to read to you more from the, okay, no, that's not it. Sorry. I wanted to read to you from let's see if I can get this to hold. Something is happening, and for some reason it keeps disappearing in front of me. I think it's something to do with OneDrive. But anyway, okay, now I want to read a little of you from hold on a second. Okay, this is from the preliminary profile. So just to make it clear, I want to be able to just read from this so you can understand how I came to my conclusions. Now, for Terry Lowe, there was no solid evidence that I know of connects Terry Lowe to the scene. Now, this is now, and I'm going to tell you what the twist is later. The prosecution police cited the following reasons as probable cause for the arrest and prosecution of Lowe. Access to the house. That's the strongest element. He did have access. Lowe acted in a strange manner. That's not evidence. It's interesting, the whole thing about he went off fake suicide thing, but he was being harassed and all this stuff, and he was a wimpy little dude. So yeah, Lowe was there was supposedly some witness who thought they saw him, and that was really questionable. That was reliable. Okay, Lowe had a history of sexual deviancy, and this is in theory. This information actually indicates Lowe was not likely to have chosen an adult female as a target of any attempted crime or sexual endeavors. Lowe had an interest in children as the objects of his sexual endeavors. True pedophiles do not change sexual preferences from children to adults. If the information on Lowe I have received has any validity, he is too weak and lacking in confidence to approach an adult. He's never been in a relationship with a woman, especially a fully functioning, physically and emotionally functioning adult. It should be noted also that some of the stories of Lowe's behavior came from the children of Mullett, who may have been coached prior to the interviews. Then the power list. The prosecution, the profiler, John Douglas, claimed that this was an indication of Lowe's fantasy and a plan for abduction and sexual assault of Phyllis Mullett. I don't mean abduction, just a sexual assault. There's no proof to elicit any such meaning, except in the minds of the profile and the prosecution. His disappearance and fake suicide, he had a number of reasons to want to escape all these things that were going on in his life. Oh, yes, and he also burnt some materials at a campfire. People do that. It's called fire building. So, if they had found the knife in his possession, if they had found a rope that matched, and I heard it was a rope. There was some other information with some other whatever. But if they had found, like you take rope and you cut pieces of rope, depending on how much rope he brought along with him. I believe it was one to tie the hands, one to tie the feet. But if you went to the house and you found the rope, you put the two ends together and they match as the same materials, and this one's cut like this and the other one, is coming in like that. That's good. That's evidence. They never found that. So of course they could be saying he's burning it up in a campsite, but he was camping. So, they never said anything was at that campsite burnt that had anything to do with the crime. Is it interesting? Sure. You want to look at it? Absolutely. Now, so I have a number of reasons to believe that he didn't commit the crime. Why? Lowe was a pedophile, or at least he appeared to be a pedophile. He had little interest in adult women. In abducting and or killing Mullett, he would have severed his connection to children and thwarted his own desires. 3, Lowe would have had to exhibit an incredible change of behavior to go from an ineffectual individual to one who had the guts to abduct a full-grown woman, violently assault her, and I say abduct here. At the time, we had a lot of discussion about it should be attempted abduction or something happening in the house. There's no proof he was actually abducting her. Although, at some point, I think they were also trying to say that. So it's a little confusing because I say these things aren't, I don't have the files in front of me because I never got them. To violently assault her and also shoot down a police chief. Also, Phyllis Mullett immediately screamed when she saw the offender in the house. The fact that Mullett knew Lowe well and had no noted fear of him indicates that even if she saw Lowe suddenly standing at the front of her with a rope and a knife, she's more likely to have responded with, "What the are you doing?" The immediate scream indicates Mullett knew the person standing there had every intention of killing her. Lowe had no history of violence that I'm aware of. Crime scene showed a man who did not hesitate to take violent action. This kind of offender either has a history of violence or is extremely angry at his victim, or both. So what we see is a lot of rage. Somebody who is willing to do that. It's not easy to kill people, and to shoot down the police chief 5 times, shoot at him that many times to make sure he's dead, and stab when he's arriving. The police chief's knocking on the door to stab the woman over and over again and cut her throat. This is not an ineffectual human being. This is a powerful fellow. All right. And the reasons that were given that it was a sexual homicide coming from John Douglas. She was naked from the waist down, and again, as she came out of a shower. She was tied up. Tying up a victim does not indicate sexual intent. In bondage scenarios, yes. However, the limited restraints on Mullett do not indicate a very well-developed bondage scenario of a sexual sadist. The restraints on Mullett are more indicative of control, controlling the victim while removing her from the premises, control while placing her in the trunk of a vehicle, her own vehicle, in my opinion, and control by keeping her restrained in the vehicle while driving. She was stabbed in the breast area. Again, this has nothing to do with sexual assault here. Semen evidence came from the boyfriend. All right. So in my opinion, the only actual motive we can see inside the residence. Now, when we're looking at a motive, don't go someplace where we don't have evidence. Appears to be an attempt to abduct Phyllis Mullett. The kind of restraint she had on her looked like the type you put a knife to her neck, you tie her up, and you make her go down, either tie her up downstairs or whatever, make her go down the stairs. There was, I'm trying to remember that now. There was something, something about the stairs. Now I can't remember it. Darn, I can't remember. It's been so long. I don't know if it's in my book. Go read my book. I'll have more information. So he wanted to get her out of the house, getting her into her vehicle, driving her vehicle away. This person did not have his vehicle there. This is very important. The vehicle of the offender was not at the scene. He was seen running away. Now, either he just completely came up on the house by foot to do this crime and was planning to leave by foot, or is planning to put her in the vehicle, her own vehicle, and take her away. And there's some interesting evidence in that light. The abductor, this is what I believe, the abductor wanted Mullett to appear as she had never arrived home or that she went back out again. Now, mind you, this person did not know she was on the telephone. Okay. So he was never in, I don't know what that, later on, he might have seen the telephone was off the hook. If he went into the bedroom and peeped out the window, he might have noticed the telephone was off the hook, but it was, by that time it was too late. At the time, he didn't know anybody was coming in his direction. So his purpose was not to have her in the bedroom. He was already had her in the kitchen. Now, again, if you're going to do something to her in the house, I mean, why pick that uncomfortable kitchen to try to work in? Why not just go pull her in the bedroom, or the living room or someplace comfy? But the living room floor is probably, I mean, the kitchen floor is just not useful. So, but the kitchen, that was on the way to the car. All right. Since there were no other vehicles noted by Mullett that concerned her, no vehicle noted early by the neighbors, nor was there any vehicle seen leaving the scene after the murders were committed, the only car available for transporting a bound person was the victim's own car. Since a sex crime or a homicide could be committed most easily in the victim's house, there had to be a good reason to remove her. So again, if you're going to do something to her, why are you even trying to get her out of the house? It's just easier to kill her there or rape her there. Why would you even bother? This was most likely so that the offender would not be identified as having some kind of relationship with Mullett, and so that a stranger might be suspected of abducting and attacking Mullett elsewhere. So if he can get her out of the house, put her in the vehicle and drive away with her, and leave her body someplace else. First of all, nobody's really necessarily knows she even got home, because if she hadn't answered that phone call, they wouldn't know she had gotten home. They could find her naked someplace and assume she'd been assaulted, or whatever. Maybe they go put her car someplace and get rid of her body someplace else, and that wouldn't be found for a long time. Who knows? But getting her out of there is very useful if you don't want to be connected to the crime. Have it happen someplace else. The abduction may also have served to delay the discovery of the crime so that the body and other physical evidence would not be found too quickly. So in other words, she's killed in the house. The next day or even sooner, somebody's going to go there and find her body. And that's not useful. So it's nice if you're connected to the crime, a person who knows you get her someplace else. Now, lastly, it is also possible the abductor did not want the house to become a crime scene or get messed up with blood and other unpleasant emissions. Now, mind you, it's interesting. The ex wanted that house. He wanted that house back right away. And he did. He got the house back. And he moved his children back into the house their mother was murdered in. When I went to Bell Center, I actually was given semi-deputized. When I say deputized, the police, the sheriff said I could go talk to Richard Mullett. He allowed me to go do so, and so I had permission because I didn't have a PI license, state of Ohio. I had permission to go talk to Richard Mullett, which I did, and he was living in the house at the time. So I actually got to go into the house, this house, and it would seem extremely odd to me that if the woman was murdered in that house, that you necessarily want to bring your children back into the location. So every time they're in the kitchen, they can think of their mother being lying dead in the corner there. That's kind of weird, in my opinion. That's another one. He could tell the kids their mother left them. That's true. That's possible. Yes. I believe the offender lured the officer upstairs quickly before he could see the victim and snatch his gun. Yes, because he couldn't. Yeah, he had to get him away from the front door because it's not that far from the kitchen, So he had to not let him go the kitchen route. He had to move him. The stairs were right next to the front door, so he would want to get him straight up those stairs away from the kitchen area. And he at that point he knew he was going to kill him. He was shot at the top of the stairs, right there at the top of the stairs. He went up the stairs in front of the guy. The guy was behind him. Again, has to be very comfortable. And apparently, the police chief, Murray, appeared to like Dick Mullett. So I'm not saying Dick Mullett is guilty of this crime, but he wasn't scared of Dick Mullett. And if he said, "Oh, she's upstairs," he would have walked up in front of him. Would the guy have walked up in front of Terry Lowe? Maybe. So I can't say either one of them. He would let either one of them probably behind them. He tied her up in the kitchen so he didn't have to drag her down the steps. That would make sense. Something about the steps that I just can't remember. But it would be more convenient to do that. This is true. You could put a knife to her throat and get her down the steps. There was something I wrote about that, and for the life of me, I can't remember it. I don't know whether it ended up in my profile or I didn't include it. Sometimes you don't include things that you think about because it's not something you can prove. Let me see if I have it here in the book. Okay. The crime scene behaviors indicate the initial assault took place away from the location where the victim answered the phone, most likely in the upstairs hallway, and quickly moving to the first floor. So I think she would be, yes, I would guess that she was bound on the first floor. Let's see. Okay, here I wrote. Tying her up and carrying her out was okay. So just definitely had to happen before the police chief arrived. Christine must have been tied up immediately upon the offender and Christine's meeting. So as soon as she screamed, that was coming up next. That would mean the offender brought the materials along with the intention of tying up the victim. Christine was tied up immediately upon encountering her attacker, and she had to be in the kitchen at the time that Murray arrived at the door. At this point, it was likely the abductor was in the process of leading Christine out of the kitchen toward the back door, her feet hobbled, hands tied, and a knife at her throat. The killer stopped to get the keys from her handbag on the desk, evidenced by the items that were spilled out of the purse. That's interesting. I'd forgotten about that. She was not gagged, and she was on her feet at the time she was brutally attacked. Oh, I forgot all this stuff. Okay. It's been a while since I've read my own book. Some of this was not listed in my profile because it was, I'm not sure why, but it wasn't. Christine was not gagged, and she was on her feet at the time she was brutally attacked. Oh, I know why, because the police had this information. So when I'm writing a profile, it's for the police view only. This was for public. She was on her feet at the time she was brutally attacked, demonstrated by the blood found on the bottoms of her feet. Why did Christine's attacker start his assault on her then? Most likely the police chief, had just knocked on the door and shouted out, "Phyllis, are you in there, Phyllis?" And she would have obviously tried to scream, and then you put her hand over her mouth. And at that point, there's no point in trying to get her out of there. There's no time. So she had to be eliminated as quickly as possible. And I have a whole thing here of why the blood, he didn't end up with a lot of blood on him, depending on how you stab people, which is how handy to be behind them when you do that. There were numerous stab wounds in the left quadrant of Christine's body, and all the defense wounds were on her right hand and right arm and hand. Now that's interesting. So no, her hands would have to be tied in front of her. Yeah, okay. Her hands were actually tied in front of her. So he tied them up this way. So she was trying to block like this. Okay. So it's been a long time since I've even looked at this. It says none of the reports I have state whether they're in front or back, but it seems more likely that they were in the front, because otherwise just seems odd that she would be defending herself very well. Killer was almost likely right-handed, and then he cut her throat and dropped her on the floor. May have also been wearing gloves because he was intending to do what he was intending to do. And then he let the police chief in. Now, so she, in my opinion, she was being taken out of the house. And again, this is somebody trying to control somebody, trying to remove her from the premises. For what reason? And I just cannot come up with a particularly good reason for Terry Lowe to do this. Now, let me see where it is. What else do I have here? Oh, I do have this in my, oh, it isn't. This is actually in my actual profile. Okay. Now, as far as him leaving the house, all right, this is interesting. As he leaves the house, there was very little time between the gunshots being fired and a neighbor across the street stating he witnessed a tall, dark-haired man coming between the Mullett house and the vacant house next door with a bag and a 5-foot stick or piece of wood in his hand. Now, remember, this is late at night. It's dark. You cannot see what he's carrying. Some people thought it was like, the sliding glass door has like a piece of wood that you put in there. But what would be the point? I mean, if you're running, why would you take some wood out of the door? That doesn't really work terribly well together. So, however, I was told that Richard Mullett kept a rifle underneath the bed in the bedroom. That's what I was told. Now, the long stick could well have been a rifle, and he knew where they were. A button was found at the foot of the bed, and a piece of household glove was removed from under the table in the same room. That's interesting. So, did somebody take that firearm with them in case they had to shoot somebody and they're escaping from a double homicide scene? Well, I don't know. Now, here's another very interesting thing. Now, the guy runs off. It is stated by the witness, a man supposedly ran down the street toward the town and the abandoned railroad tracks. Now, at the other end of the railroad tracks is Richard Mullett's area of living. Now, I don't know exactly where Terry Lowe lives. Some people thought he also lived sort of in that direction, at least down the street, not the railroad tracks. Also, in the floor of the victim's home, there were 2 partial impressions. A substance it was a tar-like substance that was on the floor of her home. 2 partial impressions. And the question is that substance similar to coal tar creosote that might have been used as a preservative on old railroad tracks? It was never checked. So in other words, if somebody parked at the other end of the railroad tracks, came up those railroad tracks, and their shoes picked up that stuff on their feet, and they were in the house and left that and killed her, and then went back down the railroad tracks to their vehicle. Now, mind you, if they parked at the other end of that railroad track or somewhere along the way, they didn't park at the end. They could park at any location. Possible intention was, nobody's going to see me drive up. And when her car leaves the house, nobody's going to question that. I can then take her car, do whatever, dump her car by the railroad tracks, jump into my own railroad track and my own car and drive away. And her car will be found by the railroad tracks, not mine. So, but they never checked. As far as I know, they never tested the stuff that was on the floor, which I thought was very interesting. Now, another thing which is kind of fascinating to me is that I did get these. Where'd they go? Why am I losing everything? What were they right here a second ago? Are they in the book now? What did I do with them? I just had true crime scene photos, and I just missing them now. Did they fall on the floor? Weird. Hold on a second. That's going to drive me nuts now. Yeah, they went missing. But those 2 crime scene photos I had held up a little bit ago, I think I held them up. Those were given to me by Dick Mullett. I went to see him, and as I was arriving, there was a backfire from his lawnmower, and he pretended to get shot and staggered across the lawn, which I thought was interesting. And then he met me, took me in the house, took out these. They're just little crappy little photos, and there were only like 8 of them taken when the crime scene had been cleaned away, and he took pictures of that in the house, and he handed them over to me, and they were, where are they? That's so weird. Where did they just go? There's a poltergeist in here. Remember we talked about poltergeist the other day? There's one in my house that just took away those photos. What in the world? Literally gone. No idea where they went to. Hold on. Oh, where's they gone? That is so weird. Nope, don't see them any place. Well, that's strange. Anyway, they were like more like Polaroids. But he handed them over to me. And I thought that was really strange too, because there's no reason to give them to me, but he was showing me them and he was all very gleeful about everything. He was like smiling and saying, and this is this, and this is this. And I just thought it was a very odd demeanor. The mother of your child was brutally murdered in this house that I'm now sitting in with you. And you think it's cool. You're not bothered by it. You're smiling about it and joking about it. And then you hand me all the photos and almost like, here's a souvenir, odd. Now, does it make him guilty? No, it doesn't. But it's pretty odd. Did the dingo take my photos? I swear to God, it's just the weirdest thing. I'm looking here and I'm like, I just had them in my hand and they're just, I can't figure out where they went to. That's why I thought they got stuck in the book someplace. But they're gone. It's freaky. I don't see them anyplace. Oh, well, that's a live show for you. I can't fix it. But anyway, his demeanor was very strange. And the simple fact that he would move his kids right back into the home, he wanted that house back. Instead of thinking, well, I could sell the house and get another house for my kids. I wouldn't want them living where their mother was murdered. Apparently that didn't bother him. But again, this doesn't make him guilty. However, let me say here, the main reasons I thought he was a good suspect was Police Chief Murray. I have the pseudonyms. I'm sorry. No, this is that's an accident. Murray Griffin. That's right. I'm sorry. The book has my pseudonyms in it, and the actual profile has the real name. So it's hard when you have two different sets of names in your head, because when you write a book, they would not let me put any real names in here. So everything is pseudonymed in this book. And by the way, they did due diligence as far as checking everything. I was not, they had lawyers all over this book to make sure that nothing I said in the book was questionable or, something could be sued over. So they spent a lot of time making sure there was nothing I couldn't have in this book. So Police Chief Griffin, now his name is Griffin, clearly knew his killer since he allowed him to walk behind him up the stairs and he kept his gun holstered. Phyllis Mullett also knew her killer. These were not stranger homicides. This was also a premeditated crime. If we eliminate Terry Lowe as a suspect because he lacks motive and capability, we must look for someone else known to the victims who had motive and capability. The most likely candidate is Richard Mullett, the husband of Phyllis Mullett. Why? 1, he was upset about their divorce and custody of the children. 2, he stood to financially gain from Phyllis Mullett's death. 3, he would not want his house messed up. 4, he wanted to move himself and the children immediately back into the house where the mother of the children was murdered. 5, his behavior changed dramatically following the crime. Apparently, people said he was never friendly to the neighbors and suddenly he was like Mr. Nice Guy. 6, he had gunpowder residue on his hands. 7, he had threatened Phyllis Mullett in the past. 8, Police Chief Griffin had been called to the residence in the past for domestic violence. 9, she would have screamed immediately upon seeing him. 10, there is no witness. Oh, there is a witness report that Mullett screamed, "No, Dick or Dickie, no." That came from the boyfriend. When she screamed, and the thing is, supposedly he said that, and then he retracted it, and he was terrified of Dick Mullett at that time. He says, he's going to come and kill me. So I don't know the validity of that, but that was another statement that supposedly, along with the scream, it was no, Dick, no. But that's not proven. He said after the murders, he was afraid that Dick Mullett would come after him, and Dick Mullett had a gun. Mullett would have known there was a gun under the bed. The profiler's interview with Mullett set up red flags. Mullett appeared to enjoy showing me the pictures he had taken from the crime scene and the blood. All right. So, what happened? I don't know. I don't have any evidence from the original crime scene to actually look at. Now, mind you, I was the sheriff was there. He was accepted my assistance in this case. he obviously was not satisfied with where this case had gone, which was Terry Lowe as the suspect, and the case was still open theoretically because no one has been convicted of the crime. But now let me give you the twist. So they'll bring you up to date with the twist. All right, the twist is this. My book, interesting happened. When my book came out, there were two cases in this book that had been unsolved for 20 years. The first case in the book and the last case in the book. In both those cases, within a month, 6 weeks of my book coming out, or 8 weeks, some very, very shortly after, both of them suddenly had DNA evidence. The first case is real questionable. I'll probably eventually do a FOIA request on that one. That's a long story on that. But the defense attorney said the DNA is garbage, and a guy took an Alfred plea. And so the whole thing is a complete mess, and no proof of DNA because it didn't supposedly even exist. And this case, now suddenly they had some DNA that was tested. Now let me read you what happened after this testing of this, right after my book came out. It was like, well, this is interesting. I could get conspiratorial here and think they both wanted those cases to be proven that, they were right to begin with, and therefore, or it could just be coincidental. Who knows? But here, I'm sorry, that's not. Here we go. Suspect into 1986 deaths, unlikely to be charged again. Okay, it is unlikely that a suspect in 1986 Ohio slayings can be charged a second time despite new DNA evidence, a prosecutor said. Constitutional issues, including the fact that a person can't be tried twice for the same crime, may prevent charging Terry Lowe again. A former prosecutor in 1994 dismissed a capital murder case against Lowe, who now lives in Lima, however you pronounce it. He was accused of fatally stabbing Phyllis Mullett and Marshal Murray Griffin when he tried to help the woman on that night. Okay, that is not going to be charged again. Now, you say, what did they find? This is the claim. And I call it a claim because I've seen no evidence that this is true. Supposedly, there was a teeny weeny bit of blood somewhere on that sliding door. And supposedly it matched Terry Lowe. Now, at some point they said Terry Lowe had some scratches on him. Okay, I don't know what that even means. I don't know what the scratches were that were supposedly seen on him, how bad they were. Were they minor? What were they? Just, a scratch? I mean, what was it? And would those scratches have anything to do with a sliding glass door? I mean, generally speaking, when you leave blood on something, it's usually because it's on your hands or something that, if it's your own blood. The victim's blood makes sense. It could be any place. But your own blood, how would it get there? Why would it be tiny? And it's supposed to be teeny weeny little something. They didn't say it as a handprint or a big, huge anything or a big drip. They just say a touch of blood, essentially. So it's like, okay, what does that mean? Now, mind you, Terry Lowe was in that house a lot. He babysat the kids. He was was he in the kitchen? Could he have, who knows, cut his finger one time and touched the door? Who knows? I don't know. So I don't know how much blood, and as far as I know, it's supposed to be like the tiniest, like so small amount. And then they said it matched him. Then the other thing was, supposedly, there's a claim that some inside one of the knots on her and the ropes, the DNA was his. Now, I'm assuming at this point this is touch DNA. They didn't say that was blood DNA. Now, mind you, again, Terry Lowe is all over that house. I don't know where the rope came from, or the rope originally came actually from the house, because, if the husband's in the house and she has rope in the house, he can just cut up a few pieces. One point they said it was macrame. It was used for tying her up because she liked macrame. I some of this I just don't know. But again, Terry Lowe's all over the house. Now, supposedly he liked to drag the kids around with some ropes. That's the claim again. So if he did that, his DNA would be on the rope. And I'm pretty much assuming whoever committed this crime was wearing gloves. So I'm not entirely impressed by the supposed DNA. Now, so a lot of people will just say, well, that's it then. You say, they said there's this DNA and there must be this DNA, and therefore Terry Lowe did it, and end of discussion, case closed. And so clearly wasn't Dick Mullett. I will say I don't necessarily buy it. Because I say too much points toward Mullett and very little points toward Lowe. So I'm not convinced. If it was a sexual homicide and Terry Lowe's semen was there, then I'd say, well, alrighty then, no question about it. But that's not what I'm seeing at all. And it's just, and whenever I read these, and there's so little on this case, and you can't get any of this information. Just because somebody says something is true doesn't make it true either. And people don't understand that. You can say things, and as long as you don't have to prove it. And it is not beyond a prosecutor's office to claim something that isn't necessarily so. So just because they say, oh yeah, we had some DNA that matched him. Is it true? Where's the reports? I want to see the reports. I want to see exactly where you found it. I want to see how much DNA you found. I want to see how you matched it. What you got. But we're not going to get that information. It's so minimal that it's questionable that it even exists, or if it exists, that it didn't exist there in some completely innocent form. Because again, if you would think though, if he had harmed himself some way, that so I'm trying to figure out where this little teeny fleck of blood came from. I'm just not figuring it out. So, and they're not telling us. So, crazy stuff. They never need to release the records. This is the tricky part. Now, when a case is an open case, and this is an open case, they never have to release the records, ever. Because the case is of interest to the state. It is not of interest to the people of the state. And people don't understand this. They think that because, let's say, a family has a right, or the citizens have a right. They do not. A homicide, a crime case, is the state's case. It's not the people's case. It is the state. And you can say, yes, the state is made up of the people, but yeah, go fight that one. The state does not have to release anything. Now, you've got the FOIA request methodology. And yes, you can try that. And supposedly, Freedom of Information Act, especially that's mostly done with the press, not with other human beings. You can try, but I've failed. I've never had success with FOIA. So they can take your money and never give you a thing. You can't. It's hard to fight. Or they can give you what they feel like giving you. They don't have to give you everything. And if nobody questions and nobody fights for it, that stuff just doesn't come out. It just stays in the files. Even, I can think of a bunch of cases where they've made statements that I've never ever seen any evidence produced, and it just boggles my mind sometimes. Like let me take BTK and Dennis Rader. They say he did it, and they say they have all this evidence. Well, just release the damn evidence. Just put it all on the internet. If you say he's convicted, didn't have to go to court, he just confessed, and that was enough. And then he confessed, and now you claim that he committed certain crimes, which you're not proving he committed. And you don't have to, because you said it, he confessed. So, and that's the problem. And it's very hard to fight getting true information on anything. No, Dennis Rader is a serial killer. And if you watch my 2 BTK shows, you'll see that I do not necessarily think Dennis Rader is the original BTK. I do believe he committed the other crimes. I believe he's a serial killer, but I do not believe he committed the Otero crimes or the, what's her name? The woman that was killed right after. I forgot her name now. I don't believe he committed the first 2 crimes. So this is the problem. So you're getting when you look at things out there, you may believe this, and I'm not saying you can't believe this. Other people believe this, but most people have never seen any of the evidence or understand the entire crime. But I went out and worked on that crime, and I know there's a lot of stuff that, he says he's BTK. He absolutely wants to be BTK. I believe he's a copycat. I believe he's a copycat, and I don't think it's ever been proven that he wasn't a copycat. There was a questionable DNA thing on the Otero crime. which is really as squirrely as all squirrely gets. And I say it's really hard to explain it because people just assume what they're being told is true. And that's why I did the 2 videos on that, because it's really questionable that he committed the Otero crimes and the crime following that. But so, it's very tricky. And so, yeah, you have to pay. Yeah, you have to pay, but you don't necessarily get anything after you pay. I'm $900 out on the South Carolina FOIA request. They robbed me blind on that. And I never got what they told me they were going to give me. Well, a weird world where crime is committed against a person and the retribution is done by the state. Well, this is because the state represents the people. You see? So in theory, yes, the state is doing this on behalf of us and on behalf of the family, of the victim's family, on behalf of the community. They are doing that on the behalf of us. But when it comes down to, for example, will they prosecute a case? They only prosecute a case that is of interest to the state. They don't have to prosecute if they don't want to. And they don't have to do the people's will if they don't want to. So they may represent us, but they don't always represent us. So it gets very, very, very confusing. Let's see. Nosebleed. Could be. Yeah. I mean, and the question is it a nosebleed from the scene because she punched him in the face? Now, she was punched, but it could be that he had punched her or whatever and got a slightly scrape on his hand and then touched something. It's possible. But then again, there's no proof it came from the crime scene day at all. If a guy's in the house all the time, there could be some speck of blood someplace from some other moment in time. How do we know? Now, we can assume it came from the crime scene, but then you say, why isn't there more? But, that's one of the problems with DNA sometimes is that the requirement is so minuscule. So if there's a large amount, like let's say there was a bunch of blood drips. She's here on the floor, and then there's a bunch of blood drips going out the back door. And those blood drips aren't hers because the killer sliced his hand open because he wasn't using gloves. He sliced his hand open when he was stabbing at her, and she defended herself because sometimes the killer gets cuts on his hand when he's trying to stab. And then his blood is dripping on the floor. Well, in that case, you're going to say that's connected to the crime scene. However, when you find some minuscule thing someplace and you say this is connected to the crime scene, it's not provable. So I would say even if that was Lowe's blood, so that little whatever it was, that touch of blood someplace was his. And even if that DNA was his on the rope, the touch DNA, in a courtroom, I mean, if I were a defense attorney, I'd shred that, absolutely shred it, because what's the proof? And then, why does Dick Mullett have gunshot residue on his hand at 11 o'clock at night? Because he supposedly was setting off fireworks with his kids. So which one of these things do you want to believe? They're both pieces of evidence. What is this one a coincidence or is that one a coincidence? So one of them probably is. Let's see. Well, she didn't know he was a pedophile. And I don't know that he ever, see, this is the thing too. I don't know that he ever exhibited that in front of her. So now, mind you, again, the claims about the behavior are coming from the estranged husband and his kids, who this is all after the fact. So it's hard to say whether he coached them before they talked to the police. Maybe he did do some things with them, but they weren't bad things. Okay. Doesn't mean he wasn't a pedophile, but it doesn't mean he is. But let's say they think, he dragged them around with a rope. So the idea is they connect the rope to the rope of the crime. In other words, he used ropes on the children, therefore he used ropes in the crime. Well, that's not that's not a proper connection. Because there's who knows what the thing is. I mean, when they say drag the kids around, sometimes people will do things like, I don't know, take some blanket and tie up the end of the blanket, and the kid will roll around the blanket, and then they'll just pull them around the house like as a fun thing. That's not a pedophile thing. That's a fun thing that people do. I mean, sometimes do with their kids to have a good time. That doesn't make him a bad person, from that. Now, there's claims that he's endears himself to women with small children, and there are claims that he is more interested in the children than an adult female. But coming from Dick Mullett, I wouldn't believe necessarily that he said that. Since he babysat the kids, a speck of blood wouldn't be a big deal because he was there a lot. That's correct. And even a scratch mark. Kids, you put kids on your neck and they grab you on the neck and they scratch you. There's a million ways you could leave a trace of blood someplace on a door, especially some of the doors you come in and out of a lot. Take the kids outside to play, you come back in. Again, I don't have a lot of faith in their claims of these DNA having any meaning in this crime. But will the crime ever be investigated further? I don't think so. Yeah. Bought the last copy of your book. That book, Amazon does this all the time, though. It shouldn't be the last copy. Believe me, they probably have a warehouse of those suckers. What'll happen is the publisher sends over books. And so what'll happen sometimes is really weird. Be careful of this on Amazon. You'll go to get a book that normally is like $15, and suddenly it's $495. And you're like, what the heck? There's something weird in their computer system. So when the book is like down to almost none, they'll say it's $495. Next week, there'll be 10 copies there, and it'll be back to $15. Just don't pay any more than you need to. I wonder if the kids suspected their father. Probably not. Because it's their dad. And they probably think it's Terry Lowe. So there's no proof that Dad did it, and there's no proof that Terry Lowe did it. There's just no proof either way. With all that info, it makes no sense Douglas thought it was the babysitter. He was literally stuck on that list of names, and he had interpreted it to mean that he wanted to assault, have power over these women on the list. He made that decision, that determination. Now, remember, one of the problems sometimes is a person is heavily involved in sexual homicides and serial homicides. And so you're looking for sexual homicide in this case. A woman who's half naked, she's tied up, she's stabbed. It's a sexual homicide. Well, it isn't necessarily a sexual homicide. And that's the problem. And I think because he had it in his head it was a sexual homicide, he immediately took that list to mean this guy wanted to commit a violent crime against a female. But there's no evidence of that. And it's created out of the head of the profiler more than anything else. Now, when you come up with a scenario, and my scenario of what I think how it happened, because I looked at where the evidence was, that for the things to happen in a row in a very short period of time, to me, she had to be already tied up in that kitchen. There was no way. She screamed, he got her, he tied her up, and she's down in the kitchen already. And for me, again, there's no reason I don't think, if he wanted to rape and do all these things to her, I think he would be upstairs in the bedroom. So he had to be removing her from the house. And again, I forgot about the whole thing with the car keys. Like somebody looked for the car keys, was getting them when the knock on the door came, and it all went to hell. So could it have been Terry Lowe taking her out in the car? He was going to take her someplace and then sexually assault her elsewhere. Yes, it could be true. It's just that as far as his whole history goes, it doesn't seem to be very likely, And I still have a problem with the screaming. that she screamed. Either she screamed, "No, Dick, no," which may be not true. That's just what somebody said. He said, he thought she said. And if she just screamed, either one of those to me more indicates the estranged husband than it does Terry Lowe. But again, this profile that I gave the police, which I said, this is what I think. This is a scenario I think and how it played out. And this is why each one of these things, I think, supported by the evidence, showed that this is what occurred, most likely to have occurred. And the creosote thing really bugs me because I would love to have known whether that black stuff that was on the like I think it was partial footprint type thing, where it came from. And since somebody was seen running that direction, it makes sense to me they also came from that direction, up the tracks. And why would that be? And what about all the other evidence? So putting it all together, my number one suspect would be Dick Mullett. My number two suspect would have to be Terry Lowe, because I don't believe that anybody else committed this crime except one of those two people. And that's what I told the police. Now, what should the police do if a profiler describes all of these things and says these things? What should they be doing? Well, they should be investigating Dick Mullett and Terry Lowe. And for John Douglas, he went straight to Terry Lowe and just threw Dick Mullett out of the picture completely. He just came in and said, well, clearly to me, it's a sexual homicide and this guy is a powerless and it's him. And I think that threw off the entire case, because I think they just completely just discarded Dick Mullett and didn't bother doing any proper investigation of him. And they went after Terry Lowe and came up with, at that point in time, absolutely nothing. And so that's why the case went south. What should have happened, and I did not see John Douglas's profile. I just see what the court wrote about what he was saying and how he wanted to testify in court. That was the meaning of that list of Terry Lowe's. He wanted to testify that was the meaning. And I agree with the court. He had no business in court saying that. And he was not happy about it from what I heard. He thought he had, that his words, his analysis should be in court as evidence, and it should not. So if he wrote a profile, what he should have done in that profile was say, my number one suspect is Terry Lowe. Here's all the reasons. My number two suspect is Dick Mullett. And he should have had those, because they're both in mine. And I would expect the police would investigate both suspects, because for God's sakes, you don't want to go down tunnel vision on one, because you can have anomalies. You can have weird things that happen. And you're like, dang it, that is so weird and unexpected. Who knew? That kind of thing. I could be absolutely wrong, and it could be Terry Lowe. I personally don't think it is. I would put 80-20, 90-10 toward Mullett, but I could be wrong. It could be Terry Lowe. So because I don't have evidence that it's Mullett, I don't have evidence as Lowe. I don't have evidence. I have a theory based on certain evidence. Now, two kinds of evidence. Let me point this out. There's evidence of things that occurred. There is evidence in the house. Evidence would be she was stabbed many times. Evidence, Murray Griffin was shot to death. Evidence, she was tied up. Evidence, somebody went through her purse. Evidence, she was in the shower. These are all pieces of evidence. But that's not evidence of guilt. That's evidence to build up a theory. And from that point on, then you've got to find evidence of guilt. So then what theoretically should happen is that, they went to Mullett and they did GSR on him, and they came up with GSR in his hands. Well, that's interesting. If that is true, okay, I don't know. Did they prove he was setting off fireworks and that would have given him that GSR? I mean, that was his claim. Yeah, it's a weird one. I don't know, because I could not see that bunch of information. So that's what they're supposed to go to his house and see if they find. I would like to know where did he have a rifle in his house? If they never checked his house, how would they know if he took a rifle? The car was warm. Did they check every place to see whether anybody saw his car go out the neighborhood or whatever? See it parked by the tracks any place? Did they check any of that? Did they do due diligence on trying to see whether they had any evidence connecting him to the crime, other than a theory? And did they do anything more with? I did more with Terry Lowe, and now, of course, with the DNA, they could say, well, that's some evidence that finally connects him to the scene. If he were taken back to court, if it wasn't a double jeopardy issue, would he be found guilty? Well, I think a lot of jurors would find him guilty because he had access to the house. He had weird behavior. He ran away and tried to claim to commit suicide. He had the power list. And now there's that little tiny DNA thing. I think a jury could find him guilty. I don't think to me, it was not sufficient at all. If I were on that jury, I would say not guilty. I'd say you better have better evidence than that. But that doesn't mean a jury might not find him guilty. But I don't think they do. I think the original investigative team failed. And I think John Douglas coming in and making his pronouncements on the power list didn't help matters any. So the case is pretty much shot. I mean, that's the way it is. It's going to go nowhere. But unless there's a confession, there's always that confession thing, and somebody will finally confess. I don't think so. Not that I know of. No, I don't think anybody. I don't think anybody is protecting anybody. So this is the number one thought people always have. Oh, well, if some guy's guilty, it means that the police chief, somebody's connected to him, is covering up for this person. And that's very, very rarely the case. Usually it's just a matter of they think it's somebody else. They botched the case as far as the investigation went. They didn't do enough of the proper investigation at the right time. So they came on, the person had time to get rid of stuff. Witnesses had time to forget everything. It's usually a case of just botching it, or maybe there just wasn't enough evidence to prove anything, and they did their best and got nowhere. So it's always questionable, but rarely are they protecting somebody. Oh, that's interesting. Interesting fact. Sometimes household pets, even cats, attack intruders. And that's how the perpetrator's blood gets left behind. Oh, that's fascinating. That is interesting. I don't think they had I don't know if there was an animal there. I don't remember there being an animal. Not that I know of. So I don't think it's true in this point. But again, here's something else. Let's say there's a cat, and the cat scratches somebody, and then they scratch their fingers and they put it someplace, and then a crime happens a week later. Then your blood is there. See? Pat, if we're sitting here thinking Terry's a red herring, and you think he's a red herring, why is he such a strong person of interest at the time? Well, you would think with the fact that the estranged husband is usually the number one suspect in a case like this, that they would have been all over him. Now they did, as I said, they went out to his house. Supposedly the hood of the engine was still hot, which is just, obviously, if that's true, he left the house. If it's true, because he says he's home sleeping with the kids, and the kids are in the next room. But why is his car have a hot engine? Theoretically, because he went somewhere. So I've never understood that. And they did the GSR, and they did talk to him, and they talked to the kids. So I don't think he was not a suspect. I just don't understand how he became such a non-suspect, and how Terry Lowe became such a suspect. And I personally think it had a lot to do with John Douglas believing this is sexual homicide. Because once you believe it's a sexual homicide, you pretty much eliminate the husband, right? Not that an estranged husband can't commit a sexual homicide. They can. But because I guess Terry Lowe is pervy, and creepy to people, then okay, then somebody decided, well, and the husband, they said weird things about him. And once that powerless, right? I think I even wrote that. I think that's what threw the whole thing off. Let me see what I said in my, let's see. It is this profiler's opinion that previous profiling theory seriously derailed the homicide investigation of Phyllis Mullett and Murray Griffin. The case should be reopened and reinvestigated with open minds and new investigative avenues. So I stated this case is still solvable and prosecutable, which I'm not sure I believe that anymore. This profiler hopes that the Logan County Sheriff's Department will move forward at this time and bring the real killer of Mullett and Griffin to justice. I wrote that in November 20th of 2003. So the homicide was in 1986. And I wrote the profile in 2003. So we're talking already right there. That's, let me try to do this in my head. 17 years later, I was brought in. And then I wrote my book. When I write my book, when they came out with this DNA thing, the book came out in 2010. So 7 years after I worked on this case, then I wrote this book, came out in 2010. And then in 2010, I believe this DNA evidence popped up. And now it's 2023. So as you can see, it's not going to be solved. I mean, it's just going to remain as it is. But I think, personally, I think he derailed it with that, his absoluteness. And I've seen his stuff before, and he tends to be very absolutist about things. Like I'm just, and this is problematic. You don't want to think a profiler, as so many people think this, is so connected to the mind of a killer that they can look at something and they know what it means. It's such garbage. It's just so not true. All right. We always knowing a motive when you read something is ridiculous. But a lot of the way FBI profilers have presented themselves, especially in the media and in Silence of the Lambs and all this kind of crap, that stupid Criminal Minds show. There's a belief that for some reason, and therefore when you have John Douglas is a kind of a he had a strong presence. Okay, I don't have that look. I don't come across as being hi, I'm Pat Brown and I know everything. I don't come across that way. He does. Hi, I'm John Douglas. And so people look up to John Douglas almost as a god of profiling. And FBI profiling has been presented that way, as they're just these brilliant minds that can read these things and figure out who the killer is and tell you his age and his race and his marital status and exactly what he wanted, what he felt like when he committed these crimes. You don't know. I mean, you don't know. It's stuff that you have been allowed to think and has been promoted. But when you tell that to detectives on the case, especially if they're looking at this guy thinking, wow, this guy, he's been doing this for 20 years, 30 years. He's brilliant. They feel, oh my God, he's brilliant at this stuff. I'm a guy, I'm from Bell Center, from Logan County. I haven't encountered a double homicide like this or possible sexual homicide like this. I'm not familiar with this. And here comes this guy from the FBI, drum roll and all that and eerie music. And he says this. Who the hell am I to say he's wrong? And so when he starts saying this, look, is a sexual homicide, which is what he told them. It's a sexual homicide. He didn't tell them it could be. He's telling it is. And so once that's done, it's Terry Lowe, period. And you just don't look elsewhere. And that's not appropriate. So if you're going to do a profile, you should lay out the pieces of information and make sure they understand. This is just an investigative avenue, and that you're not some kind of a mind reader or psychic, which is fake anyway, but still, so that exactly what happened. And I personally think he helped derail the investigation by what I consider inappropriate profiling. And Terry Lowe, if he is innocent, lucked out that the court wouldn't allow that testimony. And that's why he didn't get convicted. He really did luck out. Now, if he's guilty, it's all too bad. It's really lucked out. But there's also small town prejudices. If the babysitter was effeminate, especially back in the 80s, yeah, he probably, people thought they didn't like him necessarily. He wasn't their kind of guy. And they thought something's weird about him. And weird people commit crimes, especially weird crimes. And, but this kind of weird crime just seems odd for Terry Lowe. I mean, could he be an anomaly that he comes across as a weakling, an effeminate weakling who likes little kitties, and that's what he comes across. But deep inside, he'd really rather be with a woman, but they never want to be with him. So he decided he was going to get himself one. He was finally going to use his power and grab himself a woman. Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No. Not highly probable. Didn't someone see him running? Well, that's a good question. They saw someone running. It was 11 o'clock at night. It was dark. There was one description of a guy with dark hair. There was somebody who supposedly claimed they thought it was Terry Lowe. But again, this is very questionable. I don't know when that claim came in. I don't know whose claim it was. I don't know if somebody encouraged the claim. I don't even know if it's true. Because where are the police reports? Well, they're locked. They're still sealed. As far as I know, they're still sealed. It's been 40 freaking years. And as far as I know, they're not available. Now, this will be an interesting case for one of those documentary channels to get a hold of. Think about that. That could work out. If they could do a FOIA request, maybe the media could get it, and finally break open this case after all these years. So if you're a documentary company, I only work on documentaries where I know that I'm going to be a lead person in the documentary, so that I don't just pop in and out, and then you have everybody else coming in and out saying, "Oh, she's wrong." I would want to be that person who helps investigate everything and determine everything. And not that I have to come out with the right answer, but that at least would be able to control the major handling of going forth with this, and not just be some little sideshow, But wouldn't this be an interesting case for that? If we could get a documentary people that were not going to have a preconceived agenda and decide who they want to be guilty. So I would not go into this now. So they could come in and say, well, we think the guy's really creepy, the Terry Lowe guy. So what we're going to do, and there's some DNA evidence. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep the hold on the DNA evidence to the end of the show. And we're going to go after Dick Mullett first. Make him look really guilty. And then we'll come up with Terry Lowe. And then people will start seeing how it really isn't Dick Mullett, that it's getting more and more obvious that it's Terry Lowe. And at the end, we're going to throw in the DNA, and boom, that's going to be our documentary. That's how some documentary people work. And I have great objection to that garbage. So I would want to go in and say, okay, I have my thoughts clearly that I think the evidence that I've experienced so far leans toward Dick Mullett. However, if I'm doing this documentary, I'm perfectly happy to have Dick Mullett be not the guy. If we look at the evidence and the evidence from the police reports and everything else, actually, and I can see the DNA reports and see if there's any validity to those, and from where they got this stuff and all that stuff. If I say, well, always thought it looked like more like Mullett than Lowe. But now that I see all of this, I think that, probably they had the right guy. I'm okay with that. Because again, profiling is supposed to be an investigative tool. It's not supposed to be a conclusion of guilt for anybody until you've got enough evidence. I don't have enough evidence that either one of these guys did it. Now, I'm pretty sure one of the guys did it, but I don't have any evidence. And I'm perfectly willing to say that they don't, at this point, I don't know if they have enough to go to court on either one of them. They could go to court on Lowe more than they could on Mullett at this point, but I have to use it as a tool, not as get into a courtroom situation and say this is true. Lisa N says, I do like how detached you manage to stay even when you think the evidence points in one direction. I notice how rarely you commit 100% to one theory. It is educational. Well, yeah, I mean, it would be wrong to do that because I really can't without absolute proof. I can't say somebody did it or somebody didn't. I can just say he'd be my top suspect. I can say he'd be my top suspect, but it also wouldn't be my only one because a top suspect allows you to have room for the possibility that he's not the guy. Because there are some cases where you go, who would have thought? I mean, that happens sometimes. You can have a person who looks absolutely guilty as all get out, 10 pieces of evidence pointing there, and it turns out not to be him. And I mean, really does, not just a fake or the wrong guy was eventually convicted. No, I mean, when you're like, wow, there really was evidence to convict somebody else. That's surprising, and here's something very important too. Unless we're willing to look at things and make sure that we have an accurate result, make sure that if somebody is convicted, they're convicted on true evidence, is that when you go to train detectives or profiles in the future, if you have the wrong guy associated with a crime, and let's say, for example, Terry Lowe did not commit this crime, but people are saying Terry Lowe did commit the crime 100%. Then you start teaching, like Don Douglas goes around, he starts teaching. He starts teaching these detectives, take a look at this power list. See, this power list was the proof, which it wasn't, that Terry Lowe committed the crime. And there was DNA that matched him there later. So now everybody looks at this crime scene and says, who knew that this effeminate, child-loving fellow committed this crime? It's amazing. And they say, well, this is how he did it. And it's like, but what if he didn't do it? Then you're learning something that's not true. And you're learning to profile in the wrong way. So that's concerning to me. So I've seen crimes where I know the wrong person has been convicted. And if you look at that, then you misunderstand the entire crime scene. And you misunderstand the entire profiling methodology because it's not the guy who did it, and yet he's been linked to that crime scene. So, yeah. Leslie says that very an investigative film. I have no idea how to start that, but I bet if I Google it, there's a step. No. These production companies, when they pick crimes for certain reasons while they decide they want to go back and do it. The one I just last week's show, what was it? Last week's show on the girl who just ran away and has never been found. The 15-year-old, forgot her name now. Well, let me look it up on my own channel. It's just hard. It's hard to remember all your shows, and even if it was last week. What was it? Oh, Pandos. Thank you, Jennifer Pandos. Yeah. Okay. So Jennifer Pandos. Why did that one get done? Well, because the Jennifer's brother was obsessed about this case, and he ran into somebody who thought this would be a good case to do, and they started filming, and they got people to talk, and then so that turned into a real film, and then they were able to sell it. What is it? HBO. Or is it Netflix? I can't remember which one. I think it was HBO Max. They're able to sell it to somebody. So Why they pick to do certain cases, I don't know. That most of the time it depends on how much visuals they have, how many people will talk, and how exciting the case is, and how confusing it is, how, all these different things. They get together and have these meetings and decide. But people used to say to me things like, since I had contacts to like Montel Williams and Nancy Grace, they used to say, well, can you ask them to do my son's murder or my daughter's murder? And they say, I've tried. They say, I've called them. I sent them emails and I never get a response. I'm like, yeah, and I'm not going to get one either. So why they pick these things, I have no clue. How they come up with which ones they want to do. Now, one day, one of the producers, somebody has a production company, could happen to be trolling through the, different true crime stuff, and they go through the internet and this is Pat Brown's channel. Oh, this case, I hadn't heard of this case. And they look at it and they go, that would make a good show. And then they give you a call and they say, hey, we're interested in doing the show. And most of the time, these things don't pan out. Too. I've been asked to do so many documentaries, and I've done sizzle reels for them, and then you never hear back again. Just vanishes, because there are hundreds of these companies pitching all the time. So who knows why certain things get made into something. I'm not on that side of it. Yeah, that could be. A dark bird and a drunk exec. You never absolutely know. You don't. It could be the location. They want to go. They want to get out of the cold, so they want to go someplace warm, and so they want to do that case, but they don't want to do the other case. It could be cost prohibitive. Let's say it's in Alaska, and it's just going to cost them too much to deal with it. It could be that they can't get anybody to talk. The police won't cooperate. A lot of times, I like the police to talk in these things, and if they don't want to, they don't want to. It depends how old the case is. It depends whether it's part of the Innocence Project. It depends on so many different issues, whether they want to bother. This case, I've only found one link on the internet for the story of the case, and it's very short and it's not quite correct, but it's the only one. And this is not a popular case. I don't even know what Phyllis looks like. And that black and white picture was the only of Murray is the only picture I've ever seen of him. Now, mind you, back in the day when I did this, just 20 years ago, right? I spent time with Murray's daughter, and I have a lot of information she gave me, a whole bunch of information, which I'm not going to use in a show because a lot of it is I can't prove that it's accurate or whatever. Some of it's very interesting, but I have I just can't use it, and I would not bring this out in a production because I just don't know. But I spent a lot of time with her. I'm sure she showed me pictures of her dad, and maybe pictures of Phyllis. I don't know. I'm sure when I spent some time with Dick over here, he did give me the photos, which I suddenly can't find. I swear to God, that's the weirdest damn thing. There are two photos right in front of me. It's driving me nuts. So I keep looking around for them, going, did they just fall on the freaking floor? What the hell happened to the damn things? Can't find them. It's so weird. Okay. I'll probably find it about 5 minutes after the show, but I don't know if he showed me. Maybe he showed me pictures of Phyllis. But I don't remember what don't remember what she looked like, and that's nowhere on the internet. And so this is a now 40-year-old case. 40, about 40 years now. I don't even know who's alive anymore. Who would be willing to talk. So I'm going to say this may not be and if the case, the files are still sealed and they can't get them, and the police don't want to talk, it's not going to be a good show. So this is I Googled Phyllis and there's no pictures. No, I couldn't find anything out there at all. Random question, sure. As a profiler, do unsolved cases keep you up at night? Have there been cases you can't let go of and think about constantly? How do you regulate your profiler brain? That's a great question. Back in the day, now I have changed what I do in profiling because when I wrote this book, I was doing a lot of cases until about this time. And when I got frustrated, which is why I wrote, which is part of the book, which people don't seem to get, is they're saying, well, Pat, these cases weren't prosecuted. I'm like, that's the whole reason I no longer do what I love doing. is that by the time a profiler comes in and works on a cold case, the chances of it ever being prosecuted are about zero. Once in a great while, some miracle come through, mostly through DNA, like the Darlene Krashok case, which is in here. I profiled that case. This was not with the police department. This was for the family. This is like literally, I think Darlene Krashok was like the first or second case I ever profiled. And the guy that they eventually, he was the guy that eventually charged with it just last year. I'd never heard of. Now, I'd only heard of a couple people, and one of them was a very good suspect, but I wasn't proven it was him. It was just a good suspect in the area. There are a couple of them that were good suspects, and that was the one where I went to there were these two circular rings on her butt, and I went to the hardware stores and I picked out all these different items and I pushed them on my body and looked to see if they made similar ones. And I finally found a Minwax can that matched, went home, took off the top, and it even flattened one of the sides just like the rings on her body were. I measured them and it all matched. So in my profile went that I believe that the guy had Minwax cans, the tops of the Minwax cans on the floor of what I believe was a van, because I believe she was pulled in the back of the van. And to this day, I've never heard of whether the suspect that they had a van at the time. I still don't know. But I believe that that's so. Now, but that was prosecuted, but not through profiling. It was just prosecuted through DNA. It was a familial DNA thing, which is awesome, but not through police work, except for they finally had to, stalk him and he threw out a cup and they went, and then they got his DNA. Okay, that police work. But the original police work did not lend, outside of collecting evidence, to the solving of this case. So for all the cases I did, that they weren't prosecuted. And some of them were so screwed up by the time I got there, even if I came up with the right guy, they couldn't go to court at all. One of them, I don't know if it's in the book. Then there's cases which I think the wrong guy was arrested for and convicted. A couple of them, I just don't think that guy did it, and the evidence never proved it. Very frustrating. And so my thing is, after a while, it was like, well, if I'm not working with the police department as a full-time job, and I think every police department, big police department, should have a real profiler, a detective profiler on staff who can just spend their days analyzing stuff, so that if they come up with a case like this, they can, while they're busy running around doing all the things they got to do, they can drop the photos on the profiler and the police reports. They can start going through all the interviews and the police reports. And they can come back and say, what do you got? And that'll be in the first 48. They'd have somebody there analyzing, who's more skilled at that analysis than many detectives are, because they don't get the training. Now, I want to train detectives. That's a whole nother issue. So my thing now is mostly training. And eventually, hopefully, more detectives will have more training skills so that they would not go down wrong avenues, or they'd open up proper avenues of investigation through good analysis. So back in those days, I was handling more cases that were real cases to me that I was working on. And then, because you're trying to solve the case, and back in that day, it was, in a sense, you were trying to solve it. Here, I'm just trying to educate. I'm not trying to solve. I just spend half the night just, wake up and I'm thinking of blood spatter patterns and all. Mostly the puzzle was what kept me up. As far as the emotional thing goes, no. My belief always has been, if you allow your emotions to be a problem for you in casework, you're in the wrong business. So no, I like many people in certain businesses, you learn to turn it off and just go about your life. You do your professional part, and then you just live your other part. Nothing kept me up. Like some people say, well, I just couldn't stop thinking about that poor little child. No, that's just, I might have a moment of sadness. I'm talking to the parents and I feel that, but no, not so. Now, the first case that's in the book was personal to me. Yes, I spent years on that case. That's before I became a profiler. That's when I realized something was sort of amiss with the methodologies that were out there. And even if I thought it was this guy and it wasn't, the fact they never properly investigated really bugged the hell out of me. It still bothers me to this day. because if you're going to do, you have to follow the evidence. And if you're not going to bother to do that, that's a problem, And so, and I never realized that happened. I always thought that, wow, they get a case like that, everything would be done just perfectly. I mean, I had no idea. And that's what led me into profiling. So that one did obsess me. But, I eventually got over that and said, well, there's only so much you can do, let it go and, go on. And so a lot of cases, you have to say that. It's like, well, I think I know who did that one, but they're never going to be arrested. So you accept that, but you can improve things. And that's what I always hope to do. I feel like if I can improve something by helping people understand how to profile better and analyze crime better, then there may be a case out there. Some detective who, when he's sitting in his cruiser, bored out of his mind, having his coffee, he watches this show, and then he gets a case and he goes, Pat Brown said I should look at this and this and this and this. And it ends up helping him focus better on his case and follow proper investigative avenues. And I never hear about it, but it helps solve a case. If I leave that legacy, I'm happy. That's good for me. So anyway, you're going to take off, but I'm not sure I've given up on some kind of film. Nah. It's very, very unlikely. That's when you start letting things go, is when you realize that you don't have, you are only a part of things. You only are a contributor to things. And if your ego gets in the way, that's one of the things you have to let go too. When somebody attacks me on my channel and says I'm an idiot and a horrible human being and all kinds of things like that, I have to let that go. If I let it bother me to the extent that some people are bothered by these things, and they never let it go. I mean, I lose my damn mind. I mean, every day there's something that comes up that some astonishingly nasty stuff that's said to me, incorrect stuff that's said about me, and maybe it's the way it is. And there are cases where I like the South Carolina case, Superbikes, the one where they claim Todd Kohlhepp did it. And I mean, I worked on that case. I know the evidence. This is the case I put the FOIA request on. They stole $900 from me. But I could not get the media interested, even though I had the evidence in my hands that he didn't tell the truth. It was amazing to me. None of the media outlets pay attention. There is nothing I can do about it. So Todd Kohlhepp goes down in history as a Superbikes killer when I know he didn't do it. What am I going to do? So what I can do is do a show on it and leave it out there. And maybe one day, 5 years from now, some media people will watch that and go, I just watched your show. And then I went to your blogs on the show. Oh my God, you're so right. This guy didn't do it. How did this all happen? And they want to do a new show on Superbikes. I'm here. But if that never happens, it never happens. That's the way it goes. Christine says, you're a top contributor, Pat. You're connecting the dots and keeping the emotion out, keeping the emotional out of us to learn. Yeah. And we really can't. This is when I see people get very emotional about any case, and start identifying like personally with like even the Madeline McCann case, a poor sweet angel and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, stop saying poor sweet angel. Madeline McCann was a little girl. She went missing, probably is dead. Like 99.9% chance she was dead many years ago. It's a sad thing. But it's not your child. It's not your grandchild. It's not your niece. It's not your next door neighbor's kid. It's not a kid you held in your arms. Sad though it is. There's a multitude of children in this world who are not getting a fair deal. Right now, as we're speaking, there are children being raped and murdered across the world. There are children dying in warfare. There are children being beaten to death by their parents. What are your feelings on all of them? And if you, because it's all happening. And yet we're not linking ourselves to those. So for me, when I tell people, when you're analyzing cases or getting involved in a case, if it's not your family, you need to pull back on the emotional crap, because it doesn't allow you to see things objectively. And you start thinking, I'm going to fight for this person. I'm going to fight this. I was like, oh, JonBenet Ramsey, the darling needs to, her parents need to go down. No, Gary Oliva needs to go down. No, this is a police case. Let's understand that for whatever reasons, they have not had enough evidence or done the right things to convict anybody. It was a horrifying crime. Something bad happened. Poor JonBenet lost her life. Other than that, we cannot, no matter how much we scream into the night, are going to affect that case, except for if there's actual information that comes out that's useful. And for me, again, I'm using it as an educational tool. And what I do not like to see is when people come on to television and talk a whole bunch of garbage just to get TV time. And it's just, and then when they, especially when the commentators and they themselves get all fakey emotional, fakey. It's like, oh, it is so sad. It really hurts my heart. I'm thinking, hey, you're just lying. You're just on TV. Stop it. That just drives me nuts. But some of the what? Sunlight and the disinfectant. Well, and believe me, it's not that I don't have emotions. Some people go, well, then she's a psychopath, man. She has no emotions. No, I have emotions. But I try to keep my emotions in the right place, because, life can be emotional. There's things in my life that I have to deal with that are personal to me, sad things that there's nothing I'm going to have to deal with, which is, death of people I know, people who are severely ill, that are very close to me. There's a lot of things, and I can't overextend myself by being overly emotional in things that I should be professional about anyway. So, yeah, but well, they do have strong emotions, yes, but also strong women also know when to have those emotions and when to not put in. Oh, Vinny is a drama queen. Well, I don't remember Vinny being that dramatic before. I don't know when he went that route. Now, maybe I just don't remember back in the day. I don't remember him. I don't know. Maybe it was shorter. Maybe stuff I was with him. Maybe it was more short news stuff. And he just said, hey, Pat Brown, welcome here. Can you give us some? I don't remember him like this. So I don't know whether he's in a kind of a new set thing where he's on longer and he has to do all this. Yeah, he's very, I don't know. I don't know what happened to Vinny. I don't know. Oh, my God. Oh, you've only noticed it recently? Maybe they told him to amp it up. Sometimes it's hard to say. It's like with Nancy Grace. People say, well, she was always so aggressive and she was rude and she this and that. And personally, again, as much as I did Nancy's show like 3 to 4 times a week for gosh knows how many years, I've never met Nancy Grace. And people can't believe that, but it's true. I mean, I was on her show constantly, but I was always uplinked. She was in Atlanta. I was in D.C. She never invited me to Atlanta, so I never got to sit there and look at her in her face. And I didn't get any special times when I got to meet her. I mean, I think at Christmas I got a mug, but other than that, that was her personality on that television show. Now, personally, I never let her roll over on me. You know what I mean? She'd try, well, Pat, I'm like, whatever, Nancy. I never went for the, I never kowtowed to her in any way. I think she always respected me for that. But then people say, well, why is she that way? I'm like, maybe because that's what the show became. That's what worked. That's what got the audience. And that's what the producers wanted her to do. So she toned it down. Maybe they told her, don't tone it down. Bring it back up. We need more emotion. We need you to be angry. We need you to lash out at people and say, hey, how can you say that? That makes the show exciting. I don't know what they're saying back there in the room. She's making the big money. So if she wants to keep her job, she does what she's told. Now, maybe it's also just her personality. I have no idea because I've never actually met her. She's not sure if we believe in afterlife, but I do. And if after I die, I want answers to all the unsolved cases. Well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? That would be really neat. It's like, well, for me, what would be interesting, it's that life before your eye thing. So can you imagine it's the afterlife? And I'm like, they're like, all my cases are flashing before me. You're right, Pat. You're wrong, Pat. You're wrong, Pat. You're wrong, Pat. It was this guy. It was this guy. Maybe I don't want to know. Maybe I want to stay in my delusion that I'm always correct. Oh my goodness. Ashley went that way too. Yeah, Ashley did. I think she's the one that also trashed my Cleopatra book without even having me on the show. Thanks, Ashley. Oh my God. You're most welcome. This was a kind of confusing case to try to present because there was so much information I said I couldn't actually use for the show. And some things I didn't want to necessarily make public, but then I couldn't try to explain it either. It was a little confusing that way, and I apologize for that. And I also still don't know where my photos went. It's trying to be crazy. I'll let you know at the hangout where I finally found the stupid things, because I didn't leave this seat. So how can they disappear while I'm sitting here? Really? Like they flew. I don't know. It's driving me nuts. But I just hope I wanted to show you in this case more what happens when you're actually involved in the case, and then you get this information from here and you get it from here, but you can't get the information from here, and what you're dealing with, and then what does the basic evidence show, and where does that basic evidence lead to, and what makes most sense? And to me, I still stand with the thing that bothers me the most is this. Of all the things, if somebody shows up with this, what is your reaction? Why would you think? I mean, obviously, it's not a good thing when somebody shows up with some rope, has some rope in their hand and a knife. But theoretically, unless they're coming at you if they're coming at you like this, you would scream no matter what, I suppose. That's possible. But usually the person is not just coming at you like this, because she was walking out of a room. He probably didn't have the knife up here. That wasn't the purpose. The purpose was to have the knife for control. So it would most likely just be in his hand. And maybe it wasn't even visible. Maybe it was just some rope because he wasn't expecting to run into her at that point in the house or whatever. But that she would immediately respond to either screaming, which means she was terrified instantly, or she said, "Don't, Dickie, don't," which would be even more interesting. But that piece of information he retracted, and I don't know whether he retracted it out of fear or whether, I don't know. I'd love to see the interview on that, but can't do it because it's all, I look good with a knife. That's my fine Japanese knife collection. I do love my knives. A prop show. Well, if you watch the last one I did on the choking death of the little kid, and you saw me choking down some wet paper towels, man, that I had no idea that would cause a gag reflex like it did, but whew, it was terrible. It's like, yeah. All right. Anyway, all right, that's it. So I've got many more things to put up this week. YouTube has been very slow on giving me the go-ahead on my monetized stuff, so it's been frustrating. But so this show may not show up for a week for the rest of the public. But if you're a patron, you can watch this all week long without having to see advertising. So see, that's why you should join Patreon. Yeah, we have an interest. I might be doing something on the case everybody keeps asking me to do something. The woman who supposedly was accused of, she's in court for running over her police officer boyfriend, and people think that there's a huge conspiracy. So I may do a separate show on that just because it's interesting. And so anyway, all right, I'm going to take a break now, and I'll probably see you all. Well, I'll see you for Hangout. Send over any of your ideas, and you know me, I will try to do them if I can. So I'll see you soon. Bye.